Hello, good afternoon, namaskar. My name is Bhumika, and it is with great pleasure that I extend a warm welcome to each and every one of you joining us for a highly anticipated online masterclass. Today, we have gathered to initiate our three-part masterclass series to delve into the depths of financing green hydrogen in South Asia. This masterclass promises to be an enriching experience packed with insights and knowledge from our renowned experts in the field throughout these 3 days. This masterclass, spread across 3 days, will be divided into 6 sessions and has been organized by South Asia Regional Energy Hub, that is the SARE, in collaboration with the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, Government of India. South Asia Regional Energy Hub is USAID's coordination and communication platform, which operates under the USAID's Regional Energy Program, the South Asia Regional Energy Partnership, that is SAREP, facilitating coordination and communication of USAID's Clean Edge Asia activities within the region. At SAREP, one of our key objectives is to promote financing in the green hydrogen sector in the region. Earlier this year, we published a report titled Investment Landscape of Green Hydrogen in India. And thereafter, this year, in July, we organized a physical event on a similar theme to enhance the capacity of financial institutions within India in the green hydrogen sector. Now we believe a considerable amount of attention, knowledge, and understanding surrounding this topic already does exist in India. With this, our current masterclass, we now aim to take a step further into disseminating this knowledge by fostering interest in the South Asian countries within our region, recognizing the ongoing efforts to combat climate change and achieve net zero targets in the South Asian nations. Significant efforts are already being made to decarbonize the energy sector, which is a major contributor to carbon emissions. With this background, USAID organized this masterclass through the SARE, that is the South Asia Regional Energy Hub, in collaboration with MNRE, for South Asian countries to sensitize and simplify the green hydrogen sector for the stakeholders in the region. Throughout this immersive experience, we will have the privilege of learning some of the very accomplished topics and through our respected experts in the following topics: introduction to green hydrogen economy, costing and economics of green hydrogen, evolving technologies for green hydrogen, contracting issues in green hydrogen economy, risk management for GH2 projects, and also a global perspective, financing channels, policies, regulations, etc. I'll also encourage all our participants to please engage through us with the Q&A tab on your screen. We'll take the question answers when the presentation of our speaker gets over. So please do put in your question answers in the Q&A tab. I'll also mention, in case you have any technical glitches or technical issues, please do mention in the chat box and we'll be here to assist you. Now, without further ado, let's get started with our sessions. As I mentioned, we are conducting this along with MNRE, and we are very, very privileged to have an inaugural address by Mr. Dinesh Jagdale, Joint Secretary, Ministry of New and Renewable Energy of Government of India. Mr. Jagdale has over 30 years of rich experience in electrical and renewable energy industry. An innovative thinker, self-motivated visionary professional, he has spent over 22 years of his career working in this space. Due to his prior engagements, he could not join us virtually, but we are fortunate to have a recorded address from him. Allow me to play that address.
Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues and partner in clean energy transition, a very good afternoon. Today, we are come together for the inaugural session of the masterclass on financing green hydrogen in South Asia. This is being organized by USAID in collaboration with the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. The masterclass is a key offering of South Asia Regional Energy Hub under USAID's South Asia Regional Energy Partnership, we all know is SARE. This 9-hour masterclass program plans to exhaustively cover all the essential aspects of green hydrogen, especially from its perspective of financing. As we witness a global shift towards net zero, green hydrogen has internationally emerged as a catalyst in the global efforts to decarbonize the planet. India stands committed to reduce its emission intensity of its GDP by 45% by 2030 from the levels that it were in 2005 and achieve about 50% of cumulative installed capacity from non-fossil fuel-based energy sources by 2030. In January 2023, the Union Cabinet approved the National Green Hydrogen Mission with an objective to make India a global hub for production, usage, and export of green hydrogen and its derivatives. It is my pleasure to inaugurate this initiative targeting the South Asia region, and that too concerning the most remarkable and exciting future of energy, that is green hydrogen. We all know that the region that we are talking about, the South Asia region, is blessed with good resources. It has good natural resources as related to the renewable energy. The reason, and therefore this region has an opportunity to supply its low carbon sources of energy. The possibility of converting electrical energy into chemical energy of hydrogen and its derivatives provide a huge economic opportunity for the region. This chemical energy or the molecular form of energy can be transported to faraway regions. As you may understand through the course of the masterclass, that the round-the-clock availability of low carbon power is essential for production of green hydrogen at a lower cost. This is where the region has a competitive advantage. Therefore, as mentioned before, the integrated strategic roadmap can hugely benefit the region in both economic terms and also in meeting the respective climate goals. India, with its policy announcement in the form of the National Green Hydrogen Mission, has embarked on a similar goal to meet its economic growth targets in the most environmentally friendly manner. The National Green Hydrogen Mission targets 5 million metric tons of green hydrogen production by 2030 and has an outlay of more than 2.5 billion US dollars. The mission has various components, but if we can really look at few of them, it will catalyze, mobilize investments to the tune of almost 100 billion US dollars. It has the possibility to create more than 6 lakh additional jobs. It helps in reduction in fossil fuel imports and also abatement of 50 million metric tons of carbon dioxide emissions on annual basis. The policy has recognized the importance of financial interventions for enabling the ecosystem for electrolyzer manufacturing, plus pilot projects, research and development, and capacity building. This ministry has formulated schemes, guidelines for the implementation of the mission, and also announced strategic interventions for green hydrogen transition. We all know the SITE program. I'm sure these interventions will be elaborated through the course of this masterclass. As we have partnered with US under the Renewable Energy Technology Action Platform, this platform is now aiming to target cooperation in green hydrogen, offshore wind, as well as onshore wind and other new and emerging technologies. In addition, MNRE has also been working with USAID since very long for promoting green hydrogen through pilots, policy support, and capacity strengthening, including event that you are conducting today. We all are aware that green hydrogen provides clean molecular chemical source of energy which can be utilized at an industrial scale, production of steel, fertilizers, also energy storage applications, and it also has the provision to look at consumer level, fuel cell vehicles, and domestic heating applications. Hydrogen can contribute almost 6% of total cumulative emission reductions in the net zero scenario that we have referred from the International Energy Agency's reports. Across the globe, there have been big policy announcements and developments in respect of green hydrogen. United States has introduced the Inflation Reduction Act, which has been a hit. Most significantly, it provides clean hydrogen production tax credit to the tune of almost $3 per kilogram, translating to a total support of almost close to 13 billion US dollars in a span of 10 years. European Union's major policy announcements also include creation of a hydrogen bank. This will subsidize production in a manner similar to the contract for difference schemes that has been very, very successful in the earlier years. EU also has set a target of producing 10 million tons of renewable hydrogen domestically by 2030, coupled with some imports which they have specified. To conclude, this initiative from US aid is commendable. Such initiatives have played a huge role in creating interest in green hydrogen. We at MNRE also had successfully organized a 3-day international conference on green hydrogen in the month of July. And I thank all of you who had joined this conference because it gave a lot of insights for us to move forward. These events keep on helping us in enhancing awareness, discussions on the subject matter in past few months itself. This masterclass will further add to the discussion and increase awareness of relevant stakeholders in the South Asian countries, including our country, India. Thank you.
So this was the address by Mr. Jagdale, and we are very, very grateful that we express our sincere gratitude. So because he provided us with this recording in advance due to his busy schedule, he could not join us today. And this is definitely his insights and his remarks were definitely adding to our event. Very significant remarks he made. We now move on with our next speaker for today. That is Mr. Anurag Nalapaneni from WRI India. Anurag is a manager hydrogen at WRI India in the Sustainable Cities and Transport program. As part of the hydrogen team, his current work involves accelerating adoption of low carbon hydrogen through projects that create a conducive ecosystem for scaling hydrogen applications across various applications. He comes from a diverse experience in the clean energy and energy storage sector. He'll be talking about the green hydrogen economy and introduction applications, why green hydrogen and its value chain, and of also he'll be talking about the policy announcements in South Asia. Over to you, Anurag.
Thank you, Bhumika. And thank you, the USAID SARET team, for giving me this opportunity to present to you a brief introduction to the green hydrogen economy. Allow me just to share my screen before we get started. Is my screen visible?
Yes, Anurag.
Awesome. Yes. So as we get started, just a quick brief introduction of my organization. WRI India is a research organization that turns big ideas into action at the nexus of environment, economic opportunity, and human well-being. We work with governments, businesses, and multilateral institutions, including civil society organizations, to help improve people's lives and protect nature. Specifically on today's agenda, what I will be covering are primarily an introduction to hydrogen. What is hydrogen? What are its applications? The what and why of green hydrogen specifically, the green hydrogen value chain, and a global policy perspective on what are the developments that have been happening specifically in the Southeast Asian region on hydrogen. And then we can open up for question and answers. So to get things started, hydrogen, as we all know, is a gas. It's most commonly found as in the form of water, because hydrogen's combination with oxygen is quite a potent mix. Hydrogen is a colorless and odorless gas. It's also the lightest and most abundant element in the universe. It is the start of the periodic table. Its mass, atomic mass, is 1. And it is usually found, like I was saying, in a compound form. So that's either ammonia, methane, or water. If you look at its properties, this table is quite interesting here, given that the comparison that you can have with hydrogen with other energy carriers, you'll see its density is quite low. It's about 1/10 the density of a natural gas, both in gaseous and liquid form. And it has a very, very low boiling point, which means obviously it's found as a gas in most across most conditions. The energy per unit mass is where we really start to look at the value of hydrogen presenting itself. It has a really, really high energy per unit mass. But the energy density is where we start losing out on some of the advantages because of it being the lightest element and also the having the lowest density. You need to have a very, very high uh, pressure or very high volume density to ensure that you're able to extract the energy density from hydrogen. Moving on from the chemical properties, where is hydrogen used? So you can primarily divide hydrogen's usage into two distinct categories. One as a feedstock, where it acts as an input material for specific sectors to either make intermediary products or in the use of a chemical process like reduction. Or it can be used as an energy carrier, wherein we are actually using the specific energy of hydrogen in either through combustion or through applications like a fuel cell. So if you look at the feedstock applications of hydrogen, there are a few sectors that have been highlighted here. So that's fertilizers, primarily refining, bulk chemicals, as well as iron and steel. And as an energy carrier, we can see hydrogen potentially being used as energy storage vector, fuel for maritime and shipping, long haul mobility, and also you can blend hydrogen with natural gas. Of all the applications mentioned here, the feedstock applications are already quite well understood and also utilized across the world. But if you look at an energy carrier perspective, currently only long haul mobility and some portions of blending with natural gas are active around the world. Energy storage and maritime use of hydrogen is yet to be commercially witnessed, and there are a lot of testing and pilot projects that are happening across these two sectors. If you look at the global consumption of hydrogen, it is never actually hydrogen as a direct gas that is used. It is used in the form of a feedstock for fertilizers to make ammonia. It's used in the manufacturing of polymers and resins as well, where hydrogen is added to long chain carbon compounds or long chain compounds to manufacture specific compounds. In refining, it is used for hydrocracking, hydrotreating, as well as desulfurization of fuel. So essentially breaking down long chain hydrocarbon compounds into shorter chains, which can be more effectively utilized and combusted cleanly as well. In the iron and steel sector, you're looking at annealing. It's used as a blanketing and forming gas as well. And across general industry, you see hydrogen's applications in semiconductor manufacturing as a propellant fuel for the space industry, in glass production, hydrogenation of fats, as well as cooling of generators. So these are the current applications of hydrogen that we are seeing. And where is this hydrogen coming from is what we're going to be discussing next. So I'm going to be breaking down hydrogen in terms of its color codes. Now, this color codes is a terminology that is very commonly used quite across the world. And the color code essentially refers to where this hydrogen is coming from. When I mean where is the hydrogen coming from, the production pathway used for this hydrogen. So I'll go through each of them individually. Gray or brown hydrogen is produced via steam methane reforming of natural gas or coal gasification. Gray refers to steam methane reforming and brown refers to coal gasification. Essentially, what we're doing here is stripping the hydrogen off the carbon atom. So methane is CH4. You strip the hydrogen off the carbon atom, and you're left with hydrogen and a byproduct of carbon dioxide. Now, this byproduct is what causes the emissions related to hydrogen production. And as you can see, gray hydrogen has a significantly high carbon intensity, wherein we are releasing about 9 to 12 kgs of CO2 per kg of hydrogen that is produced. Blue hydrogen is essentially the same production pathway as gray hydrogen, but we are capturing the carbon that is emitted as a byproduct. So by capturing this carbon, we are able to lower the emission intensity of our hydrogen production process. The pathway is the same, where you're using methane, CH4, you're stripping the hydrogen off the methane, of the carbon, and you're extracting the hydrogen for whatever applications we have. But the byproduct CO2, which is generated, instead of venting it or instead of flaring it into the atmosphere, we're capturing that through carbon capture systems. And this reduces the emission intensity of your hydrogen production. So typically has anywhere between 1 to 4 kgs of CO2 emitted per kg of hydrogen produced. And the last is green hydrogen. Now, the definition can change from geography to geography. Some geographies call green hydrogen as renewable hydrogen. Some countries batch blue hydrogen and green hydrogen together and call it low carbon hydrogen. But essentially, the idea is any production pathway that emits less carbon dioxide than the existing pathways of gray hydrogen or brown hydrogen production can be referred to as low carbon hydrogen. Within low carbon hydrogen, you can have the distinction of green hydrogen or blue hydrogen as well. There are also a lot of other classifications for hydrogen basis the color codes. I do have an additional slide on that as well, which you can go through. So this sort of shows the production pathways that I was referring to. So you can have hydrogen being produced through organic compounds or from water. From water, your hydrogen production is quite straightforward. This is what we were talking of as green hydrogen. And water being H2O, you can supply electricity to water, or you can electrolyze the water molecule to split it into its constituent atoms of hydrogen and oxygen. This electrolysis process, if we are using renewable energy to conduct the electrolysis process, we end up with green hydrogen, since the emission intensity of that process is significantly lower than other forms of hydrogen production. When we look at organic compounds, you have two forms, which is fossil fuels and biomass. I'll take a look at fossil fuels first. Fossil fuels essentially, again, goes back to steam methane reforming, which is our gray hydrogen, and coal gasification, which is our brown hydrogen. The other interesting organic compound that we can use to produce low carbon hydrogen is also biomass. You can also extract the hydrogen present in biomass material. This could be municipal solid waste, agriculture residue, sewage waste, and other industrial wastes which do have organic compounds within them. You can extract hydrogen from there as well. There's multitudes of pathways or technologies which can be used to extract this hydrogen. But biomass-based hydrogen is also considered to be a low carbon source of hydrogen or a green hydrogen. Referring to specifically the emission intensities associated with hydrogen production, this table gives us a very clear picture of what is the CO2 footprint per kg hydrogen produced through each of these pathways. Like I was saying, coal gasification and steam methane reforming are one of the most emission intensive ways to produce your hydrogen. You're looking at anywhere between 15 to 26 kgs of CO2 being produced per kg of hydrogen. That's a very, very high carbon intensity. If you're looking at coal gasification, steam methane reforming, though slightly lower, still has a higher carbon footprint. You're looking at anywhere between 10 to 17 kgs of CO2, and the associated color code for that is gray. You also have methane pyrolysis, steam methane reforming with carbon capture, and you can see the color codes for these in the column in the middle. And then you finally move on to electrolysis, wherein you're using electricity from renewable energy sources, which we term as green hydrogen. Fun fact, you can also electrolyze using nuclear energy, which currently is referred to as pink hydrogen. And as you can see, all of these pathways in the bottom, specifically wind and solar, have a very, very low carbon footprint in comparison to coal gasification or steam methane reforming. So the idea to transition to a low carbon hydrogen economy is to shift away from the emission intensive process of coal gasification and steam methane reforming and transition towards much more lower carbon emission intensive production pathways like electrolysis using solar or wind electricity, and also biomass-based hydrogen production. I have not included biomass-based hydrogen production here since the emission intensity of that depends on the feedstock. And given the varying amount of feedstocks that you can use as biomass material for producing hydrogen, the emission intensity also varies basis that. So if you look at the current pathways for producing hydrogen, you can see it's dominated by fossil fuel-based hydrogen. This hydrogen is again sourced from methane or from coal through gasification and constitutes a bulk of the hydrogen being consumed globally today. About 90 million metric tons of hydrogen is produced and consumed globally as of 2020. And you can see the breakup within this is dominated by fossil fuel-based hydrogen. Electrolysis has a very, very low percentage. Byproduct in refineries is also a significant portion of hydrogen that is produced. But this hydrogen is typically consumed within the refinery itself. either for hydrocracking, desulfurization, or hydrotreatment. And you also have a small portion of projects which are now starting to utilize carbon capture systems along with fossil-based hydrogen to produce blue hydrogen, which is one of the low-carbon forms of hydrogen that I was referring to as well earlier. And if you look at it from a country-wise perspective, China currently dominates, producing almost close to 24 million metric tons of hydrogen, followed by US and then India, and then you have other countries as well. This hydrogen demand that we see over here currently is also produced through the processes that I was mentioning above, which is primarily steam methane reforming and coal gasification. The idea is this demand is going to grow in the future. In order to ensure that countries can meet their climate goals, it's important that we look at transitioning this pathway to lower forms of carbon hydrogen, which is what most of the nations who have announced national hydrogen strategies for transitioning to green hydrogen encompass. So this number is slightly old, but I think more than 21 countries so far have announced a hydrogen strategy specifically looking at transitioning to low-cost hydrogen, to low-carbon hydrogen. This is with the focus on climate goals, but also technology and cost trends. Why technology and cost trends? Because a significant portion of low-carbon hydrogen, the cost for low carbon hydrogen constitutes of the technology used to make these hydrogen. This could be electrolyzers, these could be renewable energy plants. Renewable energy today is at a cost which is almost equivalent or in some cases even lower than traditional fossil fuel energy. Electrolyzers today are also on a reduction curve, which makes them competitive enough to produce hydrogen from electrolysis. Looking at these trends and aligning them with the climate goals of individual nations, you now have multiple countries across the world which have announced specific targets on how they want to adopt low carbon hydrogen. India, as Mr. Jagdale was already mentioning, has a 5 million metric ton production target by 2030. Some of these countries have announced their hydrogen targets really early on. So countries like Japan, you can see, have announced their first hydrogen strategy in 2017, and they also have released consequent updations to their strategy. Germany is looking at creating import-based hydrogen economy to meet its domestic demands, as well as having a 10 gigawatt electrolyzer capacity by 2030. Similarly, Canada and US also have announced targets for low carbon hydrogen production, as well as applications for this hydrogen in either industry or transport sectors. So why should nations invest in green hydrogen? This has become a key discussion for countries which want to secure their energy value chains. Green hydrogen, which can be produced literally anywhere, which has water and electricity, can now enable nations to indigenize their energy production if their hydrogen value chains are well established. This also gives them an opportunity for decarbonization, because this hydrogen now transitioning to lower forms of carbon intensity allows for multiple sectors to be decarbonized. And then, of course, you have a few countries which are also focusing on export of green hydrogen. These are countries which primarily have a very rich renewable energy potential. So countries like Australia, the Middle East, India as well, which have a lot of renewable energy potential, can harness that potential to produce green hydrogen for export. And this export market is presumed to be quite strong, given that not all countries have equal potential to produce low carbon hydrogen. If you look at Europe, or if you look at landlocked countries which have limited resources for renewable energy potential, those countries are likely to import hydrogen from other nations. So now, getting into the green hydrogen value chain, essentially you can divide the value chain into three different aspects. You have production and manufacturing, transport and storage, utilization, and applications. So I'll go through each of these in a little bit more detail. So when you're looking at the production of hydrogen, it is essentially how do you produce the hydrogen? So I was referring to the production pathways which are carbon intensive. And then I was also referring to the transition pathways to which we are now moving into to have a low carbon hydrogen production. Manufacturing for this new forms of hydrogen production, whether it be electrolyzers, fuel cells, renewable energy plants, or biohydrogen reactors, is also an integral part of the value chain, given that there are limited capacities for electrolyzers or fuel cells manufacturing globally. Transport and storage of hydrogen is also a key aspect. This is because hydrogen is a very, very complex molecule to transport. One, due to its high pressure requirements, given its low volumetric density. And second, due to hydrogen's corrosive nature, in which it reacts with most materials that it is stored with. So you need to have specialized pipelines or bunkers for bulk transportation of hydrogen. Or the next alternative is you can transform your hydrogen into either ammonia or methanol, which already have existing supply chains globally to transport these materials across different sectors or across different geographies. And the final piece is on utilization and applications. So the final utilization of hydrogen can happen in the form of the hydrogen gas itself, where sectors like refining use it for hydrocracking or hydrotreatment, or reduction of iron ore for production of steel. Or you can use it as a derivative, like fertilizers, where you use it in the form of ammonia, or for the production of methanol, which can then be used for chemical industries. You can also use it as a fuel for energy. So this is where I was referring back to blending with natural gas, or usage in hydrogen fuel cells, where hydrogen is used as a gas for the production of energy. In a brief snapshot, if I was to capture the entire hydrogen value chain, this is a graphic from the US Department of Energy. And you can see there are multiple ways to actually produce hydrogen. So you have your fossil fuel with CCUS, you have your nuclear-based hydrogen, you have your renewable hydrogen, which can then either be sent in through a gas infrastructure dedicated for hydrogen and then used for its end applications, either in transport, production of synthetic fuels, ammonia, fertilizers, metals, chemicals, or heat or distributed power. You can also use the electricity grid over here to pump your renewable energy in, transport it to the point where you need your hydrogen, generate your hydrogen, and then use it in all your applications. The reverse is also possible. If we are able to establish hydrogen storage at bulk quantities for power generation during intermittent, during off-peak hours or during peak hours when there is requirement for energy in the electricity grid, you can convert the hydrogen back into electricity through a fuel cell and supply it back to the electrical grid infrastructure. So if you look at it from an energy perspective, hydrogen can create a closed loop system where you can use your renewables to either use electricity directly generated from the renewables, or you can generate hydrogen so that you can use it at a later point of time when renewable energy is not available to you, either during the night time during solar, or when the wind is not blowing for wind generation. Looking at hydrogen's applications, there is quite a distinct priority in which sectors are being targeted for hydrogen in the short term and the long term. If you look at applications in international shipping, in steel, in chemical refining, these are high priority, high demand applications for hydrogen. So these are your bulk consumers. They not only consume a lot of hydrogen, but these are also sectors which cannot be electrified. So the blue block that you see is sectors which can be decarbonized through electrification. So you can talk about short-haul aviation, you can talk about urban vehicles, short-term energy storage, and medium temperature heating, which can be electrified. So you can use your renewable energy directly to address the decarbonization of these particular sectors. But there are certain sectors which cannot be addressed through electrification, and these are the high priority sectors for hydrogen. You can see them in the box in green. And as you can see, most of these are industrial sectors. Industrial sectors have been facing a challenge where electrification is not possible. What are the alternatives? And hydrogen seems to be a promising solution over here, where decarbonization of these industrial sectors can be achieved through transitioning the hydrogen pathways to a low carbon hydrogen pathway. So this is also a brief value chain of how hydrogen through a renewable production pathway or through a low carbon production pathway can be transformed, transported, and finally used in the end industry. As you can see, there is no transformation required in case of certain sectors like shipping, trucks, or industrial use cases. But transformation can also be done where you can generate synthetic fuels or green ammonia, which can then also be used in the end use sectors. So hydrogen as a gas can be used directly in certain sectors where energy applications are predominantly considered here. As a feedstock, you can see hydrogen being transformed into a derivative, derivatives typically being methanol, ammonia, or even green steel for that matter, where it can then be used for its final end sector. Now, I would like to highlight 2, 3 components within the hydrogen value chain which hold immense importance for this transition to a green hydrogen economy. The first one is your electrolyzer. An electrolyzer is basically the machinery or the product which converts your water into hydrogen. The requirements are quite simple. You just need to give it electricity and water. And through a reduction reaction, you're separating your hydrogen and oxygen. And at your cathode, you have hydrogen being released, and at your anode, you have oxygen being released. Now, this is one of the most significant components of the hydrogen economy being discussed today with respect to electrolytic hydrogen. I think in future sessions, you're going to also look at the nuanced details within an electrolyzer, within electrolyzer technologies, where various types of electrolyzer technologies will be discussed. And I hope those will be able to shed more light into how this technology performs. If you look at electrolyzer capacity targets by 2030, you have India's number is not mentioned over here, but there are massive electrolyzer capacity targets envisioned by 2030. Australia, India, China, EU, Germany, as well as US are significant countries which have announced these targets. And the aim over here is to scale the electrolyzer targets from almost, I would say, less than a gigawatt today to a scale of hundreds of gigawatts by 2030. If you look at specifically biomass-based hydrogen technologies, you have different processes, and this is what I was referring to, based on your feedstock and also based on the type of production pathway or process that you want to employ. You have different ways of converting this biomass into hydrogen. Now, the challenge over here lies with the fact that some of these technologies are quite high on the TRL level, while some of these technologies are still yet to be tested for commercial applications. The bubble, the oval shaped bubble shows you the TRL at which the technology sits currently. And the box shows essentially how many grams of hydrogen can you extract per kg of biomass. So if you had 1 kg of agri residue, you could extract anywhere between 40 to 190 grams of hydrogen from the biomass feedstock basis through a gasification technology. Now, this number is quite wide because it also depends on the quantity of hydrogen within your biomass feedstock and also how efficient is your conversion process. You can see gasification currently is one of the most dominant technologies being explored and has a fairly high TRL level as well. You can also use pyrolysis, which has a much lower output of hydrogen per kg of biomass, but it's also quite commercially well understood, or it has a very high TRL scale, rather. You have aqueous phase reformation, similarly, a very low TRL technology, and also currently being tested for low energy intensive conversion of biomass into hydrogen. These are thermochemical pathways which involve heating and a chemical transformation for extraction of hydrogen. You can have biological pathways which makes use of existing bacteria to break down your biomass into hydrogen, but these are much lower on the TRL scale, as well as have a very low conversion efficiency. And then you have electrochemical pathways, which currently do not have a very high TRL level, but these are also essentially being explored for biomass-based hydrogen production. The last piece is on fuel cells. So essentially, fuel cells are where you will use your hydrogen to convert it into electricity. You can think of a fuel cell as the antithesis of an electrolyzer. An electrolyzer consumes electricity and water to give you hydrogen and oxygen. A fuel cell will use hydrogen and oxygen to give you electricity and water. So essentially, it's the reverse reaction. And there are some electrolyzer technologies which can be used in a dual flex mode. I think this is also something that you will discuss in your later sessions over the next 3 days, where these interchangeable technologies, they're specifically SOEC electrolyzers, which can be used as a fuel cell if you can input hydrogen and oxygen into them. And they can also be used as electrolyzers if you input water and electricity. Applications for fuel cells are primarily across stationary, portable, and transport. Now, portable applications could be off-grid decentralized power generation. Transport applications are for anywhere between road transport, shipping, as well as for aviation. And stationary applications are where you can use hydrogen as a storage, energy storage medium or a backup supply. And these fuel cells show really good efficiency numbers when you use them as combined heating and cooling, combined heat and power systems. So fuel cells typically have a higher operational temperature compared to ambient temperature, which means this waste heat from the fuel cell combined with the electricity generation from fuel cell gives it a very, very high operational efficiency. In terms of opportunities across the hydrogen value chain, there is a lot of scope across each of these independent sections. So if you're looking at production infrastructure, electrolyzers are yet to be commercially scaled to meet the demands of the country's targets that have been set for green hydrogen production. We will need a lot more renewable energy and power transmission systems to be able to transport the renewable energy to the electrolyzers. And then, of course, your balance of plant components. This is a whole, I would say, subsection within itself. You're looking at high pressure compressors. You're looking at piping and tubing systems which can handle hydrogen. And you also looking at air separator units. You're looking at dehumidifiers. All of these components which essentially form a part of your production infrastructure, while the technology does exist in some cases, it needs to be scaled to meet the requirements of this low carbon hydrogen that countries have planned globally. If you're looking at storage and transport, ports, bunkers, and ships which can store as well as move hydrogen do not exist currently. While there is limited capacity for transporting hydrogen between industrial facilities, this needs to be scaled in order to make hydrogen much more accessible to other applications across industries. Storage tanks and cylinders, primarily looking at type rating of cylinders across type 3 and type 4, which are carbon fiber carbon fiber material based cylinders which have the capacity to hold hydrogen at the pressure without being susceptible to embrittlement or corrosion from the gas itself. And finally, if you look at hydrogen applications, hydrogen being used for heating, what type of burners do we need? What type of mass flow controllers do we need? Integration of fuel cell systems into either stationary or for transport applications, and manufacturing processes which can adopt hydrogen. What type of retrofitments or modifications do they need for enabling hydrogen applications within their processes, as well as refueling stations? This section I would briefly like to touch upon. I'm not going to get into too much details on this, but essentially, if you're looking at producing green hydrogen from electrolysis, you have typically three pathways available to you. You can power your electrolyzer directly from your RE generation. You can have a battery to ensure longer operational hours, or you can just stick with just production of hydrogen during your renewable energy generation. In some cases, you can use the grid as a backup for producing power when you do not have green power available. So you depend on production of your RE power during daylight hours or during when the wind blows, and you can export some of this power into a grid and later withdraw it using the regulatory provisions provided by individual electricity system operators. Some countries also have regulatory provisions for certified green power, where through an accounting mechanism, you can purchase certified green electricity from the grid, and then this can be put into an electrolyzer to produce our green hydrogen. I'm going to be glossing over these slides, but essentially we are describing the same production pathway. So some of the challenges with hydrogen which need to be addressed before its value chain can be scaled globally are around the weight and volume. The volumetric density of hydrogen being very low means that we have to pressurize it to a very, very high quantum to be able to extract the energy from it. This means the storage systems for hydrogen are complex. They're complex and also expensive. This is one of the key impediments for storage of hydrogen as we see currently. And this is across all aspects of the value chain. If you're looking at the end use applications and of course within transport storage and also in production as well. How do we create technologies to be able to store this hydrogen at a cost effective manner and also at the quantum of which we can use this hydrogen. The round trip efficiency of these systems is also uh, being worked upon as we speak. While production of hydrogen maybe uses only about 50 to 55 kilowatt hours of electricity, when you're looking at electrolytic hydrogen, the compression of this hydrogen also consumes energy. Handling this hydrogen to be piped across from where it is produced to where it is consumed also consumes energy. And these energy costs can significantly add to the green hydrogen production costs if the technologies are not looked at from an entire value chain perspective. Material durability. So steel is no longer a valid option if you're looking at pipelines to transport hydrogen because it face issues with embrittlement and corrosion. Especially the welds around these steel pipelines is something that is very susceptible to degradation when transporting hydrogen. So we also need to be looking at scaling manufacturing of new materials which can enable transport of hydrogen. And lastly, the codes and standards. Current existing regulatory codes and standards for hydrogen exist only for use within a closed industrial complex. Sectors like fertilizers, refining have already been using hydrogen for a very long time. They understand the nuances and they understand the complications related to hydrogen transport and the mitigation measures that need to be in place to ensure safe handling of this. But if you're looking at expanding hydrogen's use cases to outside closed loop industrial complexes like transport sector or for energy storage use cases, then there also needs to be a regulatory provision or a standard and safety protocol for hydrogen applications in these sectors. That is something that globally nations are also trying to define. So how do you address these challenges? Some of these challenges can be addressed through applications like hydrogen hubs. Now, hydrogen hubs or hydrogen clusters or hydrogen valleys are different terminologies used by various nations across the globe. But the idea is you're able to locate your production and your consumption within a geographic proximity. So that's co-located production and consumption of GH2. For India specifically, there have been a few sites that WRI has been working to identify. And essentially what we are trying to do is look at geographic locations where there is already existing demand for hydrogen, see if there can be new applications for hydrogen that can also be introduced in this geography, and then have a common production infrastructure. So as you can see, the common production infrastructure, either through renewable energy-based electrolysis or biomass to hydrogen, can feed into a common storage tank, which can then be used by multiple users. So it could be converted to ammonia to be used for fertilizer sectors. It could be piped to industries, wherein it could be a iron and steel industry, or it could be a chemical industry, or it could be refining, which can use this green hydrogen. And we can also use it for residential heating applications or for hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. So these are some of the locations that we have identified at an India level to try and understand where hydrogen hubs can be developed. These are specifically segregated into 3 segments. This is also part of the hydrogen value chain itself. As you can see, you have renewable energy, you have hydrogen production, and you have their end use applications. Renewable energy being easy to transport through an electricity grid, you can send electricity to the point where your hydrogen production is needed. We've already seen why hydrogen transport and storage is a complex and expensive endeavor, which is why you want to co-locate your production and application together. And this is where you use your electrical grids to be able to transport the electricity from the point of generation to the point of the hydrogen production, where you produce the hydrogen through electrolysis and it can be used finally in your end use applications. So the locations that we have highlighted over here essentially are existing users of hydrogen. So these are either refining plants or fertilizer production plants, and they have the quantum of they consume a quantum of hydrogen which is high enough for us to be able to inject certain portion of green hydrogen. So if you're looking at a production pathway for green hydrogen, and you have the 3 distinct stages where you're producing your renewable energy, transmitting your renewable energy to the point where it is produced, and then it is used in the final end use application. Yes, and finally looking at the last piece on the global sectoral focus of hydrogen. Like I was saying, there are a lot of countries which have already started to announce their hydrogen strategies and also started to implement projects to understand the viability of hydrogen applications across various use cases. Some of these strategies are very clear on which sectors they want to focus on, while some of these, and this is also bases the priorities of individual nations. So if you're looking at priorities of individual nations and also the technology readiness available to the industry. So you were looking at how hydrogen applications in certain sectors is already quite it's already quite prevalent, and they also have a very long history of using hydrogen for various applications. So you will see a common theme across all these countries where industrial sectors like chemical feedstock or transportation for long haul sectors, this could be long haul trucking for freight, or it could also be long haul passenger buses, which have aggressive strategies for adoption of low carbon hydrogen. Whereas sectors like power generation and sectors like aviation, which currently have limited technology applicability, have a much more longer view on how these strategies treat hydrogen application within these sectors. And what are the factors that are affecting these sectoral preferences? As you can see, are renewable energy integration. Now, since low carbon hydrogen is going to be of most importance when you have renewable energy available for production of green hydrogen, integration of your renewable energy becomes one of the key factors. I was mentioning this earlier as well, where countries with rich renewable energy tend to have a focus on the production side. Now, cost and ease of adoption are also critical drivers here. For any industry to be able to use this hydrogen, the cost and ease of adoption needs to be factored in before they can transition to green hydrogen. A country's priorities for diversification of energy system also plays a role here, and ensuring geopolitical dominance for hydrogen production is also becoming a fast moving strategy across countries, wherein some nations are wanting to establish a strong export oriented hydrogen market, whereas some countries are looking at decarbonization, sectoral decarbonization targets, where they want to decarbonize industrial emissions, or they want to reduce emissions from trucking industries as a priority for which they want to be able, in which they want to be able to use hydrogen. Along with the sectoral focus, there is also quite a significant focus on the value chain of hydrogen. Now, by value chain, I'm again going back to the production, supply, transport, storage, and domestic applications as well. There are two more pieces that I've added here, which is component manufacturing and R&D. Now, component manufacturing and R&D are key factors over here because the nascency of the hydrogen ecosystem means that there exist limited capacities for manufacturing of whether it be electrolyzers, fuel cells, or any of the BOS plant systems that are needed for scaling green hydrogen manufacturing. Within the strategies of these countries, they are also focusing on what is it that they can play their strengths to. It could be either be production of hydrogen, it could be the supply and transport, or it could be domestic applications which they want to scale. Some technologically advanced countries also have the capability of manufacturing the components because they have existing companies or existing academic institutions which have been working on these pieces of the ecosystem. And given that hydrogen applications outside of existing sectors is currently very limited, it becomes very crucial for us to also accelerate innovation and research in order to be able to apply hydrogen across new sectors as well. This can be seen in legislative commitments and their relevance to how countries want to transition. You have countries which have a strategy, and then you have countries which have announced roadmaps. And then you also have some countries which are enacting these missions or trying to implement these missions or strategies through legislative commitments. This is also a slightly dated table, but there have been a lot more announcements post when this table was compiled, to look at which countries are specifically created legislation mechanisms in order to accelerate the adoption of hydrogen within these specific sectors. This can also be seen in the focus or the preference for color codes. This can be interpreted as countries which have very aggressive strategies to adopt hydrogen do not care about the color of hydrogen. They want to look at scaling hydrogen adoption in various sectors first, and then look at transitioning to low carbon hydrogen. If you look at countries like Japan, Australia, even Norway, they want to drive hydrogen adoption as much as possible. They will take that hydrogen from absolutely any source that they can get it from, because their priority is to ensure that there is sufficient hydrogen available in order for applications to be scaled. Whereas you have other countries which have shown a very, very clear preference for low carbon or green hydrogen. This is because they are more focused at decarbonization rather than looking at scaling hydrogen adoption. Now, the scaling also has to happen in parallel with decarbonization. We believe it's a combination of both that has to be tailored for each individual country's needs in order for a country to not only scale their hydrogen economy, but also decarbonize their hydrogen applications as well. Access to natural resources also plays a role here. Some of these countries like Norway and USA have access to fossil fuel resources. I'm referring primarily to natural gas here, because they have access to fossil fuel resources and also have existing infrastructure that is using these fossil resources to make hydrogen. You can straight away look at decarbonizing these existing assets. So that essentially means you take a SMR plant and a steam methane reforming plant, and you add a carbon capture system to that plant, which means you now have an asset which is ready to produce low carbon hydrogen immediately. Other countries which do not have these natural resources have chosen to jump the gun. They, rather than going through the pathway of establishing natural gas infrastructure for hydrogen production, then adding carbon capture systems to that, they are jumping the gun straight from their current production pathways to green hydrogen. That can be evident in countries. You can see that situation is quite evident in countries like India and Germany and Portugal as well. So looking at a brief snapshot of what are the announced projects so far for hydrogen, you can see this. This data is from IEA, and they have highlighted this in their 2023 Global Hydrogen Review as well. A lot of these projects are currently in their early stage, but even this density of projects which we are seeing here today was not the same last year. Since last year, there have been a slew of announcements across various geographies on low carbon hydrogen projects. So these are either hydrogen projects which are blue hydrogen with CCU, which is natural gas based hydrogen with CCUS, or green hydrogen projects. The scale of these projects is also quite significant. We have pilot projects starting from production as low as 50 to 100 kgs per day, going all the way into tons per day. And the predominant application for these hydrogen production projects we see is across ammonia. Production of ammonia seems to be the most predominant use case for the low carbon hydrogen projects which have been announced so far. Though it must be noted that a lot of these projects are yet to move to FID stages. Most of them are either in their early stage or feasibility stages. Few projects have reached FID, but that proportion is much, much lower compared to the announced projects as well. And finally, moving to India's focus for green hydrogen. India's focus is quite clear. India does not have natural gas resources or fossil fuel resources to meet its domestic energy demand. So hydrogen now becomes an option for them to reduce import of crude oil. And we also import fertilizers in the form of ammonia, as well as complex ammonical fertilizers like DAP and other NPKs. So now reduction of imports, since this causes a huge drain on the forex, is one of the key priorities for scaling green hydrogen within India. It also parallelly adds to meeting climate goals and the net zero target. And another key strength for India over here is its vast and low-cost renewable energy reserves. India has one of the cheapest renewable energy production tariffs across the world. And it also has a very vast potential for solar and wind energy, which is continuously increasing as the government builds out more and more renewable projects. Now, this renewable energy base provides the impetus for low-cost hydrogen generation to be produced. This is quite clear over here. If you look at this graph, you see a significant portion of your green energy costs come from electricity production. So the lower your cost of electricity, the lower is the cost of your green hydrogen produced. Of course, there are additional costs if you're converting it into a derivative, if you're pressurizing it for transport applications, or if you're transporting it to a different location. But if you look at just the cost of production, electricity is a primary factor over here for electrolytic green hydrogen. And having a low cost renewable energy base can significantly help any nation to establish their green hydrogen ecosystem efficiently. And this is what India also aims to leverage. And the last piece is on the technology cost. It's predicted that electrolyzers today are going to start uh, due to the scaling in manufacturing and also economies of scale, you will see a reduction in the electrolyzer cost. This has already been evident over the past 3 to 4 years, where a certain electrolyzer technology was available at close to about $600 to $800 a kilowatt hour. Today, you can commercially source that technology for about half the price, anywhere between $300 to $400 a kilowatt hour. This, along with the cost reduction in renewable energy tariffs over the past decade, now gives us the perfect recipe to be able to produce green hydrogen at commercially viable costs and meet the climate goals and net zero targets of not just India but other Southeast Asian nations as the world and the world as well. So finally, moving into the National Green Hydrogen Mission, India's National Green Hydrogen Mission is for ease of understanding, I've split the mission into its three components, which I will go through in a bit of detail. The first one is around demand creation. So substituting imports of fossil fuels, whether it be natural gas or crude oil, export is a key driver for creating demand within the industry. Export market, so capturing global demand. India wants to be able to harness its low-cost energy reserves and produce green hydrogen, which can be exported to global markets as well. Export demands of other nations have already been set. You have countries like Germany, which through the HINTCO model has announced that they will import X amount of hydrogen per year over the next 5-10 years period. And it is markets like these that India can capture if the mission is implemented in its most effective manner. And then, of course, India being a huge economy by itself has a lot of sectors which can create domestic demand within itself. I'm referring to particularly the fertilizer industry, the refining industry, as well as the city gas distribution network, where hundreds of kilometers of pipeline has come up in India over the past 5 years, and the hydrogen can be blended into the city gas distribution to be able to service the needs of customers. So this is on the demand side. On the supply side, this is where Jagdale sir was also referring to the SITE program, the Strategic Interventions for a Green Hydrogen Transition. So this is a direct financial incentive for electrolyzer manufacturing and green hydrogen production. I will get into a little bit of details across both of these. So for electrolyzer manufacturing, the government of India has already floated through SECI, the Solar Energy Corporation of India, RFP to incentivize electrolyzer manufacturing within the country. The aim over here is to provide a direct financial incentive per kilowatt produced, per kilowatt of electrolyzer produced in India. And I believe that the mission through this specific incentive aims to support about 1.5 gigawatts of electrolyzer manufacturing in India. This component is also technology agnostic in the sense any electrolyzer which meets the performance criteria set by the RFP. The performance criteria is basis a few factors, the most important being energy efficiency. So the most energy efficient electrolyzer, which can consume the least amount of energy to produce a kg of hydrogen, gets the maximum amount of incentive, and the incentive tapers as the efficiency reduces. Also, the scale at which the manufacturer wants to establish his plant is going to play a role in the performance matrix. And in ensuring that the electrolyzer manufacturing is agnostic to the technology, this gives scope for not just electrolyzer technologies of a certain type, but all types of electrolysis technologies which can be applicable for green hydrogen manufacturing through the electrolysis pathway. On the green hydrogen production, this is a direct financial incentive. So this incentive is being provided to anybody who can produce hydrogen The catch over here is that the hydrogen being produced has to meet the emission intensities of the standard set by the RFP. A tender or a request for proposals has been floated for this component as well. SECI, which is the Solar Energy Corporation of India, has uploaded their the tender document to their website, and you can see both these documents on their website. So within the green hydrogen production incentive, any producer who's able to produce hydrogen of the emission intensity as certified by the government of India will be eligible for incentives of a certain amount per kg of hydrogen. Now, this is also agnostic to the production pathway. You can produce the hydrogen to meet these incentives from any production pathway, as long as the emission intensity of that pathway is under the stipulated norms. So you could use electrolysis, you could use seawater electrolysis, you could use even biomass-based hydrogen, and you could use any form of low-carbon hydrogen as long as it is meeting the emission intensity as set by the government. The green hydrogen production incentive will be applicable to them as well. The first tranche of this incentive, the green hydrogen production incentive, aims to support 350,000 metric tons of hydrogen production from any pathway, and specifically 150,000 tons of hydrogen through biomass-based pathways. So there is a separate head within biomass-based pathways as well. Again, biomass is a focus for India primarily because India's huge agriculture base ensures we generate a lot of agri-residue. That is a lot of biomass that is currently unused. There is also a lot of potential within sewage waste and municipal solid waste, wherein it can be used for the production of hydrogen. And if we are able to develop technologies, or if we are able to incentivize development of technologies which can use the surplus biomass to use to produce hydrogen, there is significant amount of not just usage of domestic resources, but also lower dependence on other nations for either technology or for specific components which India currently does not have the resources for. It also gives the country time to develop these resources. So other than the demand and the supply side incentives, you also have key enablers. So the mission aims to bring to the renewable hydrogen producers or the green hydrogen producers access to renewable energy. This can either be through regulatory provisions like banking or storage, giving transmission access to renewable energy plants, providing them with concessional land or water resources, and also giving priority in lending to finance these green hydrogen projects. I think on this piece is where also the next couple of sessions will focus on how financing for these projects specifically can take place. Another enabler is R&D. So the mission has three specific components: mission mode projects, blue sky projects, and these are research and development projects which have been announced through the mission. And India has also announced an R&D roadmap for accelerating green hydrogen technologies. This was announced by the principal scientific advisor to the Prime Minister in the Green Hydrogen International Conference on Green Hydrogen, which MNRE had conducted, I believe, in the month of September. So the R&D roadmap for India is also currently active, wherein the country has identified specific technologies or specific interventions which need to be addressed through result-oriented, time-bound R&D activities in order to bring to market the technologies needed for a deployment of hydrogen production, green hydrogen production. So ease of doing business is also another key factor that the mission focuses on. So simplifying your taxation, simplifying your clearances, giving mitigation measures for any commercial issues, and also creating single window clearance mechanisms for establishing these hydrogen productions is also what the mission is looking at. On infrastructure and supply chain, so these are essentially what we were discussing as hydrogen hubs, where co-located hydrogen production and consumption can take place. Pipelines for transporting these hydrogens, either for refueling stations or for industrial applications. creating creating bulk storage infrastructure at ports or at transit facilities where hydrogen can be traded as a commodity, either directly as a gas or in the form of a derivative through ammonia or methanol. So development of this infrastructure and ensuring the supply chain is in place for establishing a hydrogen ecosystem is also one of the key enablers. And the last two are on regulations and standards and skill development and public awareness. On regulations and standards, I will first talk about the standard itself, which I will get into a bit more detail at the end of the presentation. But the standard of green hydrogen essentially refers to a mechanism or a framework to certify that your hydrogen has come from a low carbon source. So how do you test that if your hydrogen has come from a low carbon pathway? What are the regulations that need to be met? What are the safety certifications and what are the safety protocols that need to be put in place for hydrogen adoption across various sectors? The mission is also trying to enable all of these factors parallelly so that they can act as enablers for establishing hydrogen production, but also hydrogen applications across various use cases. And finally, on skill development and public awareness, understanding of the hydrogen ecosystem is currently very limited outside the oil and gas and fertilizer industry. It is essential that we create manpower, we create skilled manpower, and we create awareness among the public as to the potential use cases of hydrogen, and also have in place skilling programs and skill capacity building programs for the wider ecosystem to be able to adopt green hydrogen. The key outcomes of the mission are focused at producing about 5 million metric tons of green hydrogen annually by 2030. This will require an electrolyzer capacity anywhere between 60 to 100 gigawatts, which will be powered by about 125 gigawatts of RE capacity. And of course, the transmission network associated with this RE capacity to connect the electrolyzers to the renewable energy production is also going to be critical. It is expected that through this mission, about 1 lakh crores of import savings can be achieved, primarily through fossil fuels and ammonia. About 50 million metric tons of annual CO2 emissions are expected to be averted through the adoption of green hydrogen. About 6 lakh jobs will be created. This is across the ecosystem for renewable energy, electrolyzers, as well as the final end use applications. And this is expected to draw in a total investment of about 8 lakh crores. So in terms of priorities for the government through the mission, one of the key sectors is on the creation of pilot projects. So existing industrial use cases for hydrogen, quite well understood, are also able to adopt green hydrogen fairly without any additional complexities. But if you're looking at sectors like mobility, maritime, or green hydrogen from biomass, these are sectors which are currently very nascent. In order to accelerate these sectors to be able to scale green hydrogen adoption, pilot projects are seen as a vital way to be able to test proof these technologies before this scaling. And the mobility sector, while OEMs already have hydrogen fuel cell platforms ready, how do you decide on a hydrogen refueling network? Which are the locations to be targeted where a hydrogen refueling station will be required? What capacities do these hydrogen refueling stations need to service? What pressure do these service stations or these refueling stations run at? All of these are questions which will eventually be answered through pilot projects. And it'll be quite good to know that some of these pilot projects are already under various stages of execution. Indian Oil Corporation Limited, along with the National Thermal Power Corporation of India (NTPC), have already created a pilot project in Leh Ladakh, one of the northern regions in India, where they are deploying hydrogen fuel cell buses being supported by a hydrogen dispensing station, which produces its own hydrogen through electrolysis. Also, in the maritime sector, you might have read global news that Maersk is looking at ammonia and methanol-based propulsion systems for their ships. They've already set a roadmap for how they will want to decarbonize their shipping, their propulsion systems for shipping, and what type of technologies are they going to be looking at. And hydrogen is a key contender over there as well. If you're looking at infrastructure development, where do you locate these hydrogen hubs? How do you identify specific regions which can create that co-located demand and application scenario? and what type of infrastructure needs to be made available over here so that all the users of the green hydrogen can tap into a common pool of hydrogen infrastructure, and also green hydrogen from biomass, wherein how can you scale technology specifically for producing green hydrogen from biomass. So pilot projects are one of the key drivers for accelerating adoption across various sectors through the mission. I will now take a step back and also talk about what I was referring to earlier over here on the standards piece. So now a green hydrogen standard is actually quite a interesting issue to look at from a geopolitical perspective. I say this because the definition of green hydrogen is something that needs to be agreed upon by uh, any two nations which want to transact in a hydrogen commodity, whether it be hydrogen as a gas itself or hydrogen in the form of a derivative. Now, what do I mean by agreement on a standard is what classifies or what is certified as green hydrogen by us by one country need not necessarily be applicable to another country. An example of this would be if India sets an emission intensity. India has already set its emission intensity on what it is going to consider as green hydrogen. India considers green hydrogen to be hydrogen produced with an emission intensity of less than 2 kg CO2 per kg of hydrogen produced. Now, there could be another nation which possibly has a more stringent standard. They could say that their definition of green hydrogen is just 1.5 kg CO2 of emissions per kg of hydrogen produced. This mismatch between the standard across both these countries can create challenges if these countries want to trade in hydrogen and have export-import activities related to hydrogen or its derivatives. But there have already been global multilateral forums which are trying to address this challenge. The IPHE, which is the International Partnership on Fuel Cells and Hydrogen Economy, has created a methodology for estimating the emission intensity of hydrogen from various production pathways. The IPHE methodology has also been adopted by ISO, the International Standards Organization, which is now going to be used for all ISO signatories for certification of low carbon hydrogen. This was also evident through the conversations that at the G20, which India recently was a part of, which India recently had the presidency of. So within the G20, also all the producer nations, the consumer nations, the export-oriented and the import-oriented nations had very intense deliberations on what would their priority be towards a carbon intensity of the hydrogen produced, and thereby the standard what they will define for each of these production pathways. This becomes important not just from the perspective of a hydrogen standard, but also if you look at certification and testing processes. Now, the pressure at which your hydrogen refueling station operates, the certification for the components that the hydrogen refueling station uses. Now, the certification process is different across geographies. There is no harmonization of these testing processes or standardization of these safety protocols. That creates challenges since now businesses or product manufacturers will have to create different products for different regions and meet the certification standards of individual nations. So harmonization of standards at a global level is one of the key critical drivers for enabling a global hydrogen economy. And similar to how other industries have flourished, it is going to be impossible for an individual nation to have all aspects of the hydrogen value chain focused within a domestic geography. This is because while some nations have rich renewable energy resources, they might lack the material and mineral resources required for electrolyzer and fuel cell manufacturing. Some nations which have the raw materials and resources for manufacturing these components might not have the technology and the manufacturing expertise for making these components. A simple example could be a country like South Africa, which has one of the largest platinum reserves in the world. Platinum is one of the most critical elements within an electrolyzer and within a fuel cell as well. But South Africa possibly lacks the domestic demand as well as maybe the technology expertise for scaling the electrolyzer manufacturing. Another example could be the EU. EU is a huge consumer of hydrogen already, and they also have plans to scale their consumption. but they do not have access to low-cost renewable energy resource, primarily being a nation above the tropics, so their solar capacity is limited, and their offshore wind capacity, though quite strong, is only limited to the countries along the North Sea coast. If you take a country like a similar example like this can also be drawn across developing nations in the Southeast Asia region, where certain countries have renewable energy potential, certain countries have technology expertise, and certain countries have mineral resources. So it's going to be a combination of collaboration and cooperation between these nations to be able to establish a hydrogen ecosystem across the globe as well. And my final slide is going to be on barriers and the barriers to implementation of green hydrogen. So now these are some of the barriers from a technology and regulatory perspective. I will go through each of them individually and also point out a few recommendations which we feel can accelerate this, mitigate the acceleration, mitigate the implementation challenges that the ecosystem currently faces. So promoting development of domestic value chains to be able to enable a hydrogen ecosystem is one of the most critical factors for most countries. This is because, like I was referring to earlier, the availability of minerals, availability of technology, and availability of input materials required for a hydrogen economy are different. It will not be the case that any single country has access to all of them. So a country will have to leverage its individual strengths, whether it be renewable energy, whether it be technology and manufacturing expertise, or whether it be critical mineral resources. Harnessing their strengths to then collaborate with other nations and then also develop their domestic value chains is going to be a key critical priority for scaling technology and making it available on a wider scale. This can be done through promoting innovation and R&D. There are already a lot of joint research proposals and joint research projects that happen on a bilateral level, but these need to be scaled and priority sectors need to be identified across which innovation needs to be led in a time-bound manner so that we can arrive at technologies, or we can arrive at products which can now be commercially used by the industry. Technology licensing and transfer is also an easy way to make equitable access to technology possible for countries which might not have the expertise for producing their own green hydrogen technologies. From a regulatory aspect, looking at a supply-demand incentivization framework, this is a very similar to the chicken and egg problem. Parallels can be drawn over here to the electric vehicles and the charging infrastructure. If there is no demand for green hydrogen, then how can you ensure supply? But we already see some of these challenges being addressed through market mechanisms where a premium is now available for low carbon hydrogen. Green ammonia or green methanol today do command a slightly higher price than their traditional counterparts, which are produced from gray hydrogen or brown hydrogen. And if we are able to create market mechanism and market frameworks which can incentivize the production of green hydrogen and also incentivize the production of green hydrogen, demand drivers will automatically fall into place as green hydrogen becomes more and more common. Another piece is on establishing critical hydrogen infrastructure. Now, when I say critical hydrogen infrastructure, this encompasses pipelines, ports, and also transmission lines, because all of these pieces play a very critical role in individual aspects of the value chain. The transmission lines play a very critical role in the production side of the value chain, where renewable energy needs to be connected to the points of where the hydrogen is being produced. Pipelines need to transport the hydrogen from the production to the final end use scenarios, and ports become a very key enabler in transacting these commodities, whether it be ammonia, methanol, green steel, between countries which want to export and import these low carbon hydrogen products. And the final piece is on modification of existing regulations and legislations. This is one of also the key regulatory aspects that needs to be addressed. I already spoke about the standard of hydrogen, the standard for low carbon hydrogen or green hydrogen. Other than that, there also needs to be a harmonization of standards for hydrogen adoption across various sectors. The transport sector currently does not have all the regulations which have been codified for hydrogen refueling stations. To be able to deploy hydrogen refueling stations across any country, there needs to be a very robust safety as well as regulatory compliance process in place. Some of these regulations do exist, but are not directly applicable to the transport sector. So there need to be new legislations or new regulations that need to be created for this. Individual regulatory bodies across all nations are working towards establishing a regulatory ecosystem that can enable hydrogen adoption across individual sectors, as well as enabling the entire hydrogen value chain as well. And I think with that, I'd like to close my presentation and open the floor for any specific questions that folks might have.
Thank you, Anurag, for your time and all the effort you have put into detail out each and every aspect. I think this session has been really, really enriching, and we do have a lot of questions in the Q&A tab you might be seeing. I'll read out few of the questions. Many of the questions have already been answered by our team, but let me take some questions. So, okay, so this is from Akhileshwar Vaid. He's asking, we are solving for running the electrolyzer. How about the water?
That's a very great question, Kleshwar. In fact, that's the reason why you also have technologies where direct seawater electrolysis is being explored. So essentially looking at water from the ocean, which can be electrolyzed to give the hydrogen. This is going to be a very critical challenge for countries which do not have access to water. Countries like India, the Middle East as well. Yes, we do have a lot of renewable energy, but we do not have water to spare for hydrogen production. But a much more deeper nuanced understanding is still required, because we also use water for the production of hydrogen through SMR, steam methane reforming. They also consume water. Now, is it going to be similar quantities of water which we will which we will use for electrolysis as well, is something that a lot of more research and assessment needs to be done to understand whether will we be creating additional demand for water, or will the existing demand from the reduced demand from gray hydrogen be sufficient enough to power the electrolysis requirement for water. Also, around water, yes, you can always say that desalinated water is the solution. We can just go ahead and use that. But that adds an additional energy aspect over there. So that 55 units of or 50 units of electricity per kg of hydrogen does not include energy requirements for compression. It does not include energy requirements for desalination in case that's the case. It does not include energy requirements for transport. But yes, water is a very critical aspect that needs to be answered as well.
Thanks, Anurag. So another question from Reena Kori. She says, what is efficiency drop in case of green hydrogen production from electrolysis and then back to electricity through fuel cell in a closed loop?
That's a very valid question as well. It really depends on the type of electrolyzer you have, and it also depends on the type of fuel cell you have. But typically, the conversion efficiency is obviously not going to be 100%. It's going to be lower. The range of that conversion efficiency, I think, could be as low as about, I'm taking a educated guess here. Please do not quote me on these numbers, but I think the lower range of those efficiencies could be anywhere between 30 to 40%, and the higher range could maybe touch almost 60. But I don't think it's a very efficient process where you're looking at over 90% conversion rate. Because electrolyzers themselves, a simple way to calculate this would be electrolyzers use 55 kilowatt hours of electricity for just electrolyzing the water. That's not even looking at maybe the purification of water required for the electrolyzer, and of course the other components I was talking about. Hydrogen specific energy density at 1 kg is about 33 kilowatts. So right off the bat, you're losing about close to 40% of efficiency right there from your electricity input to your hydrogen production. Assuming your fuel cell is 100% efficient, if you put that 1 kg of hydrogen back inside your fuel cell, will you get back 33 kilowatts? I don't think so. So at max, you're looking at about a 60%, 60 to 65% conversion cycle. But the technology is evolving quite rapidly, and those numbers could obviously change basis higher efficiency systems.
Thanks. So we have another question from Datla Jagannatha Raju. He's asking that I'm establishing a bio CNG plant with super Napier grass as the feedstock. Can I produce hydrogen in my plant? And what is the cost of plant and machinery for production in of 1 ton of hydrogen?
So if you're producing bio CNG, I'm not sure if what process you're employing for converting your feedstock. But if you are gasifying it to CNG and then you want to convert that CNG into hydrogen, that's a slightly complex pathway. It's better off just to use the CNG for whatever applications you have. But if hydrogen is what you need, then you have two potential pathways. One is you can convert it to bio-CNG and then you can steam methane reform the CNG into hydrogen, or you can use your feedstock directly, gasify it, and then produce your hydrogen. So both of them are very different pathways. While the first one, I'm guessing, is something that you're already doing, which is producing your bio-CNG from the feedstock. If you want to produce hydrogen, then you can add an SMR plant to the bio-CNG, and that can convert your bio-natural gas into hydrogen. An alternative would be use your feedstock, set up a completely separate gasification line for specifically production of hydrogen. And I wouldn't know the costs around those equipments. You might have to speak with an industry expert for that.
Okay, so Akshay Sharma, he asks production of the hydrogen through biomass gasification, how much of CO2 produced per kg of hydrogen production?
Yeah. Yes, that's a very interesting question, Akshay. So I don't have the answer to that straight off the top of my head, but it depends. You can look at it two ways, right? One, from the legislation and regulation perspective, wherein some geographies consider biomass-based power or biomass-based energy applications to be carbon neutral, in the sense that the carbon that was sequestered when the plant grew or when that biomass was being generated is basically being released back into the atmosphere. So it's a carbon neutral pathway. So if you look at it from a regulatory perspective, as long as you're using biomass and converting that biomass to H2, the CO2 emissions might not necessarily be a very key determinant if the regulations are geared that way. The second way is to look at what feedstock are you using. Some certain amount of feedstocks have a higher carbon content than the other. So essentially the carbon content within your feedstock, if you're using an agri residue, even within agri residue, you can have mustard stock, you can have rice husk, you can have wheat husk, you can have sunflower husk, you can have different types of agri residue. Each of these residues have their own carbon content. Now that carbon content is also going to determine how much CO2 is produced per kg of hydrogen. So I think a one answer fits all solution might not be the case here. You will have to specifically look at the type of feedstock you're using and also the conversion technology. It could be thermochemical, it could be anaerobic digestion, or it could be the third pathway for biomass based hydrogen production. And each of these will have, again, their own intensity as per the biomass feedstock used.
Okay, so Gaurav Gupta, he's asking what is the average return of equity that hydrogen generators earn during a project?
I think I'll pass that question on to Vivek, who's hosting the next session after me. And I think he's going to get into a lot more details. And I think he would have
all the economies. Yeah, yes. So, okay, so Ruchita Shah, she's asking power generation is shown as aggressive in the chart in Australia, Japan. What is it referring to?
power generation through hydrogen combustion. So you can actually use there are gas turbine engines which can use hydrogen as a fuel directly instead of natural gas. You also have ammonia which can be combusted in these natural gas turbines. So these turbines are, some of these manufacturers make flex fuel turbines, which means you can pump in a certain percentage of natural gas with a certain blend of hydrogen. And the blend these days can go up almost up to 100% hydrogen as well. So the power generation over there refers to using hydrogen for generating electricity. Also, Japan has a really interesting pilot that they're running where I think they have deployed fuel cells in a residential application for energy and heating purposes. I'm not sure of the number of fuel cells that they have deployed, but this is for a certain district within a city in Japan, where I think they have piloted fuel cells which have onboard, which have hydrogen storage along with them. And these fuel cells are now generating electricity for the household as well as heat for the household. So that could be another application that these countries are exploring.
Sharing Tashi, he's asking what are some of the R&D being initiated by India to bring down the overall cost of hydrogen production, considering huge target of green hydrogen generation. I think this is a question from Bhutan. Yeah, go ahead, Anurag. Yeah.
So some of the key R&D projects, you can look at the R&D roadmap. It's been announced by the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. It's on their website. It highlights the specific key priorities for R&D. Some of these include alternative materials, alternative PGM materials for electrolyzers, reducing dependence on critical minerals, and also looking at storage technologies, storage and distribution technologies for hydrogen. So these are just a few of the key aspects I've touched upon. If you would like more details, please do take a look at the R&D roadmap. It is there on the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy's website.
Again, Chopel, he's asking what is the global standard to consider low carbon intensity hydrogen?
Differs from country to country. India standard is 2 kg CO2 per kg hydrogen. Europe has a slightly different standard. I think they start at 3.6 kgs per 6 kg, 3.6 kg CO2 per kg hydrogen. And the target differs from country to country. There's no standard target across the world, or there's no standard intensity which is considered as low carbon across the world. And this is also one of the key factors that I think needs to be discussed at a multilateral level in order to accelerate a hydrogen economy.
Okay, so Nitin Cherian, he's asking, independent expert organizations have issued white papers on repurposing existing NG lines for hydrogen supply and transport as NG is phased out. How much of an impact could it have for the global south considering our little dependence on NG?
Right. So that's a really good question. It NG pipelines being repurposed for hydrogen it's a technologically complex as well as capital intensive activity. So it is better to lay a new hydrogen pipeline completely, which is what the global south can work towards, since they do not have existing NG infrastructure. If they actually do want to establish a hydrogen economy, going for 100% hydrogen pipelines maybe should be the way forward.
Okay, we'll have a couple of more questions. So I'm just asking what Ved Samant has asked. Electric applications, especially vehicles, have the best efficiency, energy available for running the application as per energy consumed in the making. So this is more of a comment. Anything you would like to add, Anurag?
Yes, you're right, but it doesn't make sense if you're looking at a 55-ton freight truck which has a 10-ton battery, and you're lugging around a 10-ton battery and just have 45 tons of freight. It doesn't make any sense for you to have such a big battery and reduce the capacity for your freight. So for long haul applications, for heavy duty applications, and for applications where weight becomes a limiting factor, yes, batteries currently do not have the ability to decarbonize those sectors. On the efficiency, yes, you're right. Hydrogen fuel cells possibly might not be that efficient, but they can at least move the quantity of weight, so what becomes an important metric over there is your tons per kilometer, or rupees ton per kilometer. How much does it cost to run a certain ton per kilometer?
Okay, Kamal Laksiri is asking, what is the possibility of using rainwater after a basic treatment?
You can. Essentially, an electrolyzer just needs deionized water. Since you have an electrolytic reaction at the electrodes, as long as you don't have any mineral impurities, you should be fine. You will not have any deposition of minerals. So rainwater is quite clean. All you need to do is deionize it, and you can go ahead with electrolysis.
So there is another question from Nitin. He's asking, could you explain the slide where you had mapped the various levelers currently focused upon across the value chain of GH2 across countries, specifically for R&D in component manufacturing? What was the methodology behind measuring this index?
Yes, so this was done basis a couple of factors. One was looking at the focus within the national hydrogen strategy of that country itself. Second was looking at their research index in terms of how much of a technology expertise do they have, specifically in manufacturing of components like membrane electrode assemblies. Looking at their if they do have a significant industry in the manufacture, significant presence in the manufacturing industry, and a few other factors were considered for coming up with that index. But by no means is that index, I would say, entirely 100% accurate. The index is evolving as we speak. Countries are prioritizing, like India, for example, has prioritized on R&D a lot more post the creation of that study. And of course, India would have a lot more ticks across the value chain since the mission was announced.
Okay, so we have a last question from Rameshwar Berthal. He's asking how much electricity is required for production of 1 kg of H2?
Great question, Rameshwar. I think it depends really on the type of electrolyzer technology you're using. At subsequent sessions, I think we'll get into more detail on that. But it could require anywhere between 35 to 55, 60 kilowatts of electricity to produce 1 kg of hydrogen. That is subject to the type of electrolyzer technology.
Well, I think with that, we conclude the session. And thank you so much, Anurag, for taking out time and answering so many questions and sharing your valuable knowledge with all our viewers. Thank you so much. And we hope to have you for our future sessions as well. With this, we now move to our next session with an in-house speaker from our team, Mr. Vivek Salwan. He is the investment facilitation expert at USAID South Asia Regional Energy Partnership. He has more than 11 years of experience, professional experience in power and banking sectors, working with various organizations like Edelweiss and Reliance Power. And so over to you, Vivek, here, and he'll be talking of more, like we already mentioned, about the costing and economics of green hydrogen. Over to you, Vivek.
Yeah, hi everyone. Good afternoon. Bhumika, can you present the slides for me?
Okay, have you shared it? Just give me a moment then, just a second.
Yeah, right. So yeah, I said good afternoon, but I have been told that there are participants from other time zones as well. So good day to you as well. And it is my utmost pleasure. I'm quite much delighted that I am going to deliver this session on costing and economics, which seeks to initiate dialogue in the region for setting up an integrated strategic roadmap for laying down foundations of the green hydrogen economy. And this was, highlighted by a bureaucrat from the government of India. And it also, caught my attention that when he said that the region is abundant with low carbon sources of energy. So this is what, as he also mentioned, this is what provides a competitive edge to the region. And if we think about other regions, for example, Middle East, which is expected to provide competition to India and the region for exporting green hydrogen to the European Union or other economies. So they have abundant solar power, but they lack water, and they also would not be able to produce low carbon energy during the night time, which can be backed up by hydropower in our scenario. In the case of South Asian region, somebody was asking, not many people asked whether hydropower is considered as hydrogen produced from hydropower can be considered as green hydrogen. So answer is yes, because it is also low carbon source of energy. And but it would also depend upon project to project, because so how it would contribute to carbon emission if a hydropower project is constructed. So generally hydropower projects are especially if they are reservoir type, they end up taking away some amount of forest, which would lead to deforestation. So if we compare the two scenarios, when the power project is constructed and when the power project is was not there, so that means there would be additional carbon load on the earth. So that way, it also contributes to carbon emissions, but but still it would be much less in quantum than other sources of energy. For example, a coal-fired thermal plant. So so the region can end up being a net exporter of energy rather than net importer of energy as it is today, because fossil fuels, as the focus is moving towards uh, global warming and mitigation of global warming. So the greener sources of energy would be preferred worldwide, and this is where the region can benefit as well. So, Bhumika, can you move to the next slide?
Yeah, you can see.
Yeah, I am able to. So, I just thought I'll run through the agenda and also set some expectations around what I'm going to cover. So, I am going to start with very basic building blocks of evaluating the costing and economics of green hydrogen. So I'll be discussing various parameters, the broad parameters which can impact the costing of green hydrogen, and I'll be focusing more on the production cost. So there are other components of cost as well, which I'll touch upon. But whatever headline figures that you generally come across, it is regarding the production cost. So when Reliance Industries Limited says that they are going to bring the cost of green hydrogen to USD $1 per kg, so they mean the production or generation cost. We would also have to consider the storage, distribution, and transportation cost when we are going to evaluate the overall economics of a green hydrogen project. And I'll then move on to the production parameters that are involved. So it would be focusing on the sizing of a green hydrogen plant, and we'll be studying how the various renewable energy profiles impact the sizing of an electrolyzer plant, and how the system design would be impacted on an overall basis. We'll understand the optimization and trade-off involved between the capacity and the main input, which is the contracted power. So the power can be contracted. It could be an integrated power as well. That is to say, we have a dedicated source of energy or dedicated power plant, be it a solar plant or be it a hydropower plant or a wind plant, which would directly feed into the green hydrogen plant for generation of green hydrogen, or it can be contracted with a third party. So, and we'll also be discussing the various electrolyzer technologies which are available. I will only discuss how it would impact the costing and economics. In our subsequent session, on session 3, we have a guest who will be focusing on the production technologies, who would be covering the electrolyzer technology in detail. Then I'll move on to levelized cost of green hydrogen. Now, okay, so just a sort of disclaimer. When I mean levelized cost of green hydrogen, I will be focusing on the production cost. And so when we say levelized cost of production or levelized cost of storage, it refers to the individual component. But for this session, just assume whenever I'm saying levelized cost, it means production cost. And when I say landed cost of green hydrogen, it would have all the components of green hydrogen, which has to be considered. So I'll be discussing the cost associated with the chemical conversion and reconversion. And I'll be discussing the storage cost associated with it, and also the transportation and distribution cost. So my focus is going to be the third section, because within the limited time we are we we can only cover so much. So we are going to consider the production cost, and during this section 3, I'm going to also demonstrate a simplified model, an Excel model, to understand how various parameters impact the system design and ultimately the cost of green hydrogen and green ammonia. So rather than focusing too much on the assumptions and parameters, I'll advise or I'll suggest that we understand the mechanics. Why I'm saying so is because these assumptions or parameters vary a lot. So it's a new technology, and it doesn't have much of a precedence. So we are moving. Although I should rather not say it's a new technology. It's an old technology. Electrolyzers are there since 19th century, but the deployment at a large scale is something novel about it. And there are rapid gains that are happening as far as the technology is concerned, and the new technologies being developed, old technologies are being modified to make it more efficient, given the focus on global warming and reduction of carbon emissions. So this is about agenda, and last of all, it would be accompanied by a question and answer session. And Bhumika, please move on to the next slide. Yeah, so first of all, I'll be upfront discussing the crux of the matter. So there is, I'm sure we all get to hear a lot about whether in any country we are getting to hear a lot about clean hydrogen. And this is something which has caught up within last couple of years. And but what are the challenges in adoption? So it's as simple as that the economics are not justified as of today. The thing is that the existing conventional technologies, they are much cost competitive against green hydrogen. But given the emission reduction targets, this is something which policymakers are planning, that we move on to a green hydrogen setup. We move on to an economy which is supported by green hydrogen, as the Honorable Joint Secretary mentioned, that we have a replacement in form of molecular or chemical source of energy. So primarily, we use energy in our day-to-day lives in two forms. One is in the electron form, which is the electricity we get in our homes, and other is molecular form of various fossil fuels that we use. So now we are already greening the electrons. So, but the electrification has some limitations. So therefore, we are looking for a molecular source of energy, which is green, and there cannot be a better fuel than hydrogen, because somebody had asked a question that what is the calorific value? It has the highest calorific value. It is primary school science, maybe secondary school science. It's only that the calorific value in terms of weight, it's highest, but the handling cost, the flammability of this gas has rendered it unusable till today. But now the focus on green sources has made it the talk of the town. So just to, with the schematic, although Anurag explained it in an excellent fashion. So let's just focus on the schematic before we jump on to the various components of the costing and economics. So it's as simple as that we electrolyze water to produce hydrogen and oxygen. Somebody was asking, how can we use oxygen? The thing is, it's very simple. Everything in the world exists in its oxidized state. So if we talk about iron ore, if we talk about other ores, aluminum, bauxite, they are in oxidized state. So the challenge before us is to use deploy reduction techniques. I'm talking in terms of very high school, very basic high school chemistry. So the challenge is to reduce these ores, or even if we are removing some impurities, say in refineries, uh, to uh, to its elemental state, or on in form of ores. So that's why oxygen cannot be used much. It can have medical usage, but it would have limited usage. So it would just be released in the environment. We cannot have a lot of commercial application from the oxygen that is produced from electrolysis. Now this electrolysis has to be backed by renewable sources of energy, and we also know that uh, the renewable sources of energy are intermittently available, especially the solar energy and wind energy. We have, for example, in India itself, so we can have as high as some 500 to 600 gigawatts of solar potential. I may be underestimating the solar potential rather, but we cannot use that much amount of energy at a given point of time. So what option we have is that we can store this energy in some form and use it at a later stage. Now with battery storage, that scale is very difficult to achieve. Therefore, there is an option of storing that energy in form of in form of chemical energy, for which hydrogen and their derivatives are the best option. So, one energy storage is one of the applications. So there are broadly two basic applications. One is in form of energy storage or as an energy carrier, and the second is as a chemical feedstock. So already around 100 million tons of hydrogen is being used worldwide, of which about 5-6% is used in India itself for various industrial applications. It is used in the fertilizer industry. It is used somewhat in the steel industry. It is used in refineries for desulfurization of the crude oil. And there are many such applications as a chemical feedstock. But the existing source of hydrogen is, as we call, gray in nature. It is by the process of steam methane reformation. So as a replacement of that chemical feedstock can contribute to around 6% reduction in carbon emissions, as Jagdale sir also pointed out. So we utilize renewable energy. We plan to utilize the renewable energy for generation or production of green hydrogen, and it can be used as such, and it can also be used by conversion into some of its derivatives. It can be methanol, and it could be ammonia as well. Ammonia is the most traded chemical commodity worldwide because it has various applications. So it can be converted into ammonia as well. And then we have various applications, as you are seeing in the schematic. I have explained some of them. Some of them are very futuristic, and some of them are already being used. Only that the green hydrogen would be costlier than the existing sources of the method of creating hydrogen. I believe this schematic is quite much clear to everyone, because we are going to touch upon various such the value chain over the course of our presentation. So Bhumika, can you move please? So this is I'm upfront, as I told you, stating the challenge, which is around the costing part of it. Bhumika, please move on to the next slide. So I'm starting with a summary, because I want the participants to go home with the crux of the matter. So I thought the best way of summarizing is that what is the existing estimate of the cost of green hydrogen production or generation. So, and I thought I'll be sourcing this cost analysis from one of our reports. So as Bhumika mentioned, in May 2023, we had launched a report around investment landscape, which holistically covers all the issues, only that it is focused more on India. It's available freely on internet on the SEREP website, and anyone can access it. So, but I'm only going to touch upon various parameters which impact the costing of the production cost of the green hydrogen. So as we can see, there are two. I mean, with any other commodity, there are broadly two sorts of costs. One is regarding the initial capital expenditure, and the other is the operating expenditure. And in this case, the capital expenditure is with respect to the electrolyzer facility. If it is an integrated facility in which the derivative is also produced. So, for example, if it is a fertilizer requirement, so naturally they would require ammonia, because ammonia is widely used in production of fertilizers, and so it would be better to have an integrated capacity. So, the capacity would also involve capital expenditure on the Haber-Bosch process, which is the most efficient process of ammonia production. So there needs to be capital expenditure on that count as well. So especially in Middle East, many of these green hydrogen power plants are announced as an integrated facility in which the renewable capacity would also be integrated. So that would save the transmission cost. Otherwise, for example, if we are going to have the green power source from a hydropower plant in Nepal, and the green hydrogen facility is somewhere in Gujarat, so it would involve some transmission cost, which would have to be considered whenever we are evaluating the production cost of green hydrogen, because it would add on to the input power. And talking about input power, it is the major cost, and it is the major operating expenditure, and as we'll subsequently see, that it is the main lever which will drive the future cost of green hydrogen. And I also have a graph which is around the cost of ammonia in the recent past. So, just to compare it with what is the estimate of the green ammonia cost that can be there in India as per our investment landscape report. So it is in the range of 850 to 1100 US dollars on per metric ton basis. So the estimated levelized cost for a brief time, you can see around 2022, the mid of 2022, was lower than the traditional or the market price of ammonia. So this was because there was an immediate spike in the prices of natural gas and crude oil, which is linked to which is how the natural gas prices are decided, because it is benchmarked against the crude oil prices. So the crude oil prices has had increased suddenly because of the Ukraine-Russia war, and briefly it had spiked so much that the prices of traditional ammonia had increased from the estimate of the green ammonia we have. But broadly, we can see that it is much below than, even if we consider 900 to 1,000 as an average price, expected price of green ammonia, it has been historically lower than that. So, so this is the crux of the costing challenge, that the conventional sources are much cheaper as on today, although they are much more they are producing a lot of carbon emissions, but the pricing is much lower. So how to bridge this gap? Bhumika, please move on to the next slide. So it can be done based on, by reducing the input cost. So there are two ways. There are two categorizations we can do on how we can achieve the reduction in levelized cost of the production of green hydrogen. So one is through supply side developments, which we are expecting. So this can be contributed by the policymakers as well. And but in this, the private sector or the R&D would have to play a lot of role as well. And most importantly, it would also be backed up by the developments in the cost curve. So with any technology, with any equipment, so we have seen that the benefits of economies of scale kick in when the production is at higher scale. So when the world is moving towards installing a lot of electrolyzer capacity, the benefits of economies of scale are going to kick in, and we can expect with such benefits of economies of scale and with some development in the technology side backed up by R&D, that there would be some quantum in reduction of the pricing of green hydrogen. So what could be that quantum? It is anybody's guess. And so now whatever is presented to against you in the screen, it is about it's just a scenario. So we just thought that there are a lot of announcements that are coming across in the media that we are going to target the pricing of green hydrogen at $1, at which it becomes quite much cost competitive against the conventional technologies. So we just thought of building a scenario. So one such scenario is presented before you that, for example, if the capital expenditure, the upfront capital expenditure drops by 80%, it's quite much of an amount. But no, as on today, we don't know. And this is the reason why why the developers are in a wait and watch mode as well. Because what is happening is that that people are expecting the reduction in the prices of this capital expenditure, and they are wanting to wait before it can be deployed on a wider scale. But unless we start deploying this technology, that economies of scale cannot kick in. So it's like a chicken and egg situation. And this is where the policymakers can take initiatives, which we'll be discussing subsequently, to incentivize this. And Anurag also explained whatever incentives have been provided by the government of India and also various governments across the world. And we also have some sessions in which we are going to discuss this in detail. And so this is a scenario in which we can have a pathway towards the reduction of green hydrogen to USD1 per kg. Bhumika, please, next slide, please. So that was about supply side interventions. Now we are going to talk about demand side interventions. Supply side interventions is that you lower the cost of supply of green hydrogen. Now, demand side interventions, it is that either we force the consumers of green hydrogen in some manner to adopt green hydrogen against vis-a-vis their conventional technologies, or we incentivize them in some manner that they replace their existing technologies with green hydrogen. So now this is a very excellent graph. I have sourced it from a report from McKinsey sustainability. It's an excellent report. I'll recommend reading it. It's titled as, although when you get the presentation, you will get the title. It's about decarbonizing pathways for India, and we have adapted it to our estimate. So we have so how to read this graph is, if you can see the dashed line. So the break-even point for a USD for adopting green hydrogen is when the cost is around 3.9 US dollars per kg, right? So if for the existing technologies, if you increase the cost for them, for the end consumer industries, by this much quantum, if they are forced to have pay USD 3.9 on per kg basis, then they'll be incentivized to move towards green hydrogen, and this is the break-even point. As you can see, the analysis that we did was that at least $200 of carbon emission on per tonnage basis has to be paid by the existing consumers when it would become an incentive for them, when it would be break even, when they'll be indifferent between the conventional technology and the technology backed by green hydrogen. So this is a sort of pricing support, and it's a demand side intervention, and it is backed by introduction of a carbon tax. So what we say is that for the applications which use natural gas through steam methane reformation or on directly basis, a $200 per metric ton of carbon dioxide emission would be sufficient. But what we see is, as far as the application of green hydrogen is concerned in the transportation sector, it is still not in the in spite, even if we tax their carbon emissions at this rate at $200 per metric ton basis. So even then, it would be they don't have the incentive to switch to green hydrogen. So that is where we believe that possibly usage of electric vehicle as of now is much more cost efficient and also much more environmentally efficient. And such transformation or such applications would be adopted at a very later stage. And we can also see that the steel sector is quite much in the money. And I don't know how many of you are from finance background, but at least we can understand at a break-even point that if something is beyond the break-even point, we are in the money on comparison basis, and if it is lower, then we are out of the money. So this application in steel industry is quite much incentivizing for the players. There is one challenge which is regarding the capital expenditure that would be required to reorient the steel production facilities. That is a different challenge which has to be evaluated. And so there are other demand side intervention that can be taken up by policymakers. They can introduce purchase obligations, as was initially for the renewable sources of energy. So even if it is cost prohibitive for the industry, they'll still, if it has been imposed by the policymakers, they would be forced to use it. As Anurag was mentioning, that many countries are looking to introduce green hydrogen at any cost. So even if it means that initially it would be grayer sources of hydrogen. So so at any cost, if it is introduced at any cost initially, then there would be that reduction in the cost curve in the near future. So the economies of scale we were talking about, and the wait and watch mode that many players are in, we were talking about. So there are other ways as well that if we can reduce the cost of input power, how it can be achieved is, you can possibly waiver the transmission charges. Now, the transmission charges have already been waived by the government of India, although it is there is a time limit attached to it, but we are expecting that this would be extended. And there could be incentive in form of tax credits, which reduces the ultimately the production cost of green hydrogen. So the Inflation Reduction Act, it's a lot of it has been talked about a lot, which has been introduced by the government of United States, which is offering pricing support to green hydrogen in form of tax credits, both in the investment and the production cost. So these are some other demand side interventions which can be taken up. Bhumika, please move to the next slide. So yes, as I conclude this summary part, so now I was majorly focusing on the production cost. Now, when we are considering the landed cost, whatever would be cost for the end consumer, we will have to consider other factors as well. We have discussed renewable energy cost. So we should understand that there would be some transmission cost associated with it as well. Now, it would depend if it can be co-located with a green hydrogen facility. But I mean, we have to make some trade-offs, which we'll be eventually understanding in the subsequent slides. And there are challenges around the round-the-clock availability, because we will again understand in the next section. And we'll be talking about the production facility cost as well, because again, there is a trade-off involved versus capital cost and versus cost of power procurement, which is again linked to the round-the-clock availability of the green power or the renewable power. And the other three cost components, so we have not discussed so far, and it is around the efficiency losses. Although there were some questions regarding this in the first session, when people were asking that if we do it in form of loop. So there are some losses associated with this conversion and reconversion, which is a form of energy penalty, as it is said, on the green hydrogen when it is ultimately used. And there are some storage costs. So the storage can be a local storage as well, which is to absorb the variability in renewable energy. And it could be related to the supply chain storage as well. Because, as with any commodity, whether it is wheat, whether it is food items, or whether it is chemicals, you have to maintain some buffer to absorb the fluctuations in demand and also supply on the production. So similarly, for green hydrogen, there would be requirement of large storage to be kept as buffer, right? So there are storage costs associated with it. And there are transportation and distribution costs also associated with it. And as Anurag was pointing out, that the technology part, it is still very much underdeveloped. We all understand by now that green hydrogen is very difficult to handle because it is highly combustible. It is quite much flammable. It is a safety concern as well. So when it is transported and distributed, it would involve specialized infrastructure. So there were questions around R&D. So there is a lot of research and development which is going around as far as this problem statement is concerned, because this problem statement is something new. The world was not required to transport and distribute something like hydrogen in the past. But now, if we want to deploy green hydrogen, it's very much of a requirement, and it's also a major evaluation parameter for export-oriented project. So this cost third, fourth, fifth. So although we are not focusing, but we'll be discussing these in the subsequent slides, and we'll be but this will be more around backed by our secondary research. So whatever technical reports are available online, so we have sourced it from there, and whatever in-house study has been conducted. So I'll also give some guidelines if someone who has the understanding of these things, how can we evaluate the cost of cost of these requirements, the conversion, reconversion, storage, or transportation and distribution. So anyone with a background in the petrochemical sector, I believe, can be very well equipped in analyzing these costs. But whatever analysis that has been presented, it has been mostly sourced from secondary research. Okay, so now, Bhumika, if we can move on to the next section, please. Please move on to the next slide. So the most important factor, sizing of the production facility, and this is where we focus on the production cost. So although Anurag touched upon this, but this is the biggest challenge as far as production of green hydrogen is concerned. So if it is backed by solar power alone, so suppose there is a green hydrogen facility which is coming up in Middle East. So in fact, the larger scale utility scale project that is coming up in the world, it is NEOM, that is based out in Saudi Arabia. So it is backed by solar power and also some storage as well. So if you see the graph, it's very easy to understand this, that at certain points of time, the production is at its peak from the solar energy, and during the night time, there would be no energy available from the solar panels, and which will result in no production of green hydrogen. And as a result, you would not be able to utilize your electrolyzer facility for generation of green hydrogen, and the equipment lying idle is not a very good scenario for any production facility, which means that we are not utilizing it in an optimal manner. So how can we reduce this variability? Not exactly variability, but these situations of no power available. So we can have some combined sources of power. So as we can see the RE profile of a wind power and solar power, if we combine a facility which is backed by both wind and solar power, so at least we will be able to sort out the issue of non-availability of green power for particular period of time, because at least during the night time we would have some amount of power available from the wind sources, right? But this variability, if somebody is has a background from the chemical industry, they would understand this variability. It's not easy to handle, and many a times the end usage of as we were talking about, it is initially it is going to be replacement demand of green hydrogen that has to be taken. That would happen in the near future. So this variability is very difficult to handle. Now there are some constant sources of power. One is obviously grid, but grid has an emission factor. We cannot utilize it, and we have the option of using hydropower and nuclear energy, wherein we can have a constant supply of power. But again, it has some limitations. For one, nuclear, because of the radioactive concerns, the world has phased out a lot of nuclear capacity. Although in recent times, world is switching back to, there are some projects that are being implemented in, for example, in Great Britain. There is one project that is coming up. And there is, as far as hydro is concerned, it's a good candidate for low carbon power. But as we were talking about that, there are difference of opinions. There are, the standards of green hydrogen have to be synchronized between various geographies. So the EU regulations, so they are very much focused on additionally component. They say that if we already have a facility which is a low carbon source of energy, we cannot deploy because it would merely be diversion of that electrical energy. It would not additionally lead to reduction of or abatement of carbon emission. So they say, although there is some cooling period or some grace period that has been provided, which will end in 2025. After that, any green hydrogen project is to be backed up by a new facility. And we know that the gestation period of hydropower projects is quite big. So, if we have to come up with a green hydrogen project very immediately, even if we talk about India's target of 5 million metric ton, so which would require around 60 gigawatts to 100 gigawatts of renewable capacity, depending upon the utilization. So it's very difficult to come up with hydropower in these many years because it has a long gestation period. So I think I was quite much clear about explaining that what is the issue around the variability of renewable power, which adds to the cost of the green hydrogen, the end cost of green hydrogen, because your equipment would not be optimally utilized. And then I also talked about the requirement of continuous supply of green hydrogen for any chemical process. So if, for example, if it is a fertilizer facility, they need constant, although they do go for shutdown, but whenever it is done on 24/7 basis, on 24/7 basis. It is continuously done. Otherwise, there would be startup costs associated with it. So the solution to this is that we create some storage of green hydrogen. What we'll do is we'll produce excess green hydrogen during the better availability of renewable power, and later on and it would be stored, and later on when the renewable power will be low, or there will be no power if it is backed by a solar facility. So the stored hydrogen will be used, and the continuous chemical process will go on. But again, it would add to the cost of green hydrogen, and also your equipment will still be lying idle, right? So it also there is also a question of regulatory and standard issue. So there is some bare minimum power which would be required by the electrolyzer facility. So if it is backed by solar power, so what would happen is that it would end up consuming some sort of power from the grid. And when it is consuming power from the grid, so what would happen is that you are actually using some high carbon power, and which will add to your carbon emissions. So you may end up breaching the maximum allowable carbon emissions for your hydrogen, and you may end up being non-green certified facility. So there are various issues that this variability in renewable power which are created. So Bhumika, please go on to the next slide. Right. So in a way, it is a form of trade-off between electrolyzer size and contract power. As I was talking about, you may end up idling your electrolyzer capacity. And if you're fine with it, although it would lead to additional hydrogen cost, but still you would have to go for additional contractual power or additional power during the day. So if you're fine, if you're increasing the storage of green hydrogen or green ammonia to be used in the night time, so you would have to increase your contract power during the day. And if you are increasing your contract power, you will end up increasing the cost of input power. So I know many of us understand the power industry. I can see through the background of the participants that many of us are from the power industry, and we realize that the RTC availability of renewable power comes with additional cost because it is backed up by renewable storage. So you would have to increase your contractual power, and which will end up increasing the cost of input power or per unit cost of power. So this trade-off has to happen. We'll understand these mechanics from the Excel model that I'll be demonstrating in a while. Bhumika, please move on to the next slide. So just to sum up the optimization objective that we have. So we have the trade-off between the electrolyzer size and the contract power. It is a trade-off between the initial capital expenditure and the operating cost. So we would have to balance it based on the parameters, based on the various decisions we make with respect to the hydrogen facility, with respect to where we are locating it or where is the end consumer. So these parameters would have to be considered. So the trade-off between the capital cost and operating cost will be done. So as far as the capital cost is concerned, the system, the capital cost of the system, complete system, can be divided into three costs. So it is with respect to the electrolyzer facility, and it is also with respect to the contractual power. The storage facility, and also the contracted power if it is a co-located facility. That is to say, if it is an integrated, we have an integrated supply of renewable energy. So, and as far as operating cost is concerned, the electricity tariff would be the main deciding factor, and also another operating cost that would come up with is the type of electrolyzer that we choose. So the type of electrolyzer would be discussed in detail in the subsequent section, but for our sake, we can understand that there are two prevalent technologies: the proton exchange membrane and alkaline. Alkaline has more history than PEM. It is less efficient. But it does not require rare earth materials, although it requires, but not to the extent of the PEM technology. Although PEM is the operating cost of PEM is much lower, but that's make the requirement of rare earth metals and other issues make the capital expenditure higher. So there is another technology which has a much lower, much better efficiency. So these numbers are efficiency, indicate the efficiency, and it is quoted in units of power per kg basis. So as we see, the SOEC has the best efficiency, but the limitation is that the water has to be preheated before it can be used, which can add to energy, and ultimately it would be again a sort of energy consumption, and it can find the best application in the industries which has a lot of industrial heat going out as waste. So you can deploy that waste heat in preheating the water, and you can utilize SOEC electrolyzer which would be much more efficient than PEM or alkaline. But again, the technology is in nascent stage, and PEM and alkaline is the prevalent technology that is being used. So, Bhumika, please move on to the next slide. So, yeah, so this table provides the comparison of commercial electrolyzer technologies, and you can see that there is a big range, and it's always frustrating when you have a big range of assumptions, but we have to deal with this because it's a nascent technology. Things are moving very rapidly, and they are slated to move much more rapidly as the economies of scale kick in. And so this has been sourced from Oxford Institute for Energy Studies. So you will get, when you get this presentation, you can also refer the hyperlink. And so we can see that the capital expenditure of PM is higher, and but the operating efficiency, both in terms of cost and other parameters, is better. So it has a better response time. So when the renewable energy is quite much, variable, so it is better suited to respond to that variability, and it has a better efficiency. And although the range is a bit of confusing, but actually it is towards the lower end of the spectrum. From the most of the secondary research that we have carried out and the experts that we have spoken to, and it has a lower operating power as well, which again helps with the intermittency that we face with the renewable sources of power. And it has a better stack life. Stack life is that the electrolyzer, so these stacks would be explained in the electrolyzer technology in the subsequent session. So for now, these are like cell membranes, where the actual electrolysis happens, and these are to be replaced on frequent basis, not frequent basis over some years. But a PM technology has a better stack life than a alkaline, which ends up saving some cost. So Bhumika, please move on to the next slide. Yeah. So we'll be focusing a bit on how to actually do an estimate of the levelized cost of green hydrogen. This is solely focused on the production cost. We are not considering the storage and transport distribution cost, and even chemical conversion and reconversion cost. And I'll be doing it through, I'll showcase an financial Excel model to you. And so I'll just first walk you past the procedure that I have utilized. And it's a simplified model because given there are people with various backgrounds who are the participants in this session. So it's a simple, and also I believe that when you are getting introduced to the topic, it's better to focus on the broader parameters. In subsequently, we can think of making a more robust Excel model. Although we do have an in-house robust models that we have done for various clients, which because of the confidentiality issues cannot be shared across, but this model would be shared. And so how do we move about, how do we do that estimation? So typically there would be a target production capacity, target production, which for example for a fertilizer plant there would be requirement of on per day basis of green ammonia. Then we estimate how much green hydrogen would be required to convert it into green ammonia. So for that there is a conversion factor of 0.18. So it doesn't vary. It depends upon a chemical equation, which you can search on the internet. I'll be also discussing this subsequently. But those who have a background in science, so these are so this ratio is decided upon stoichiometric factors. So we all know. I don't know how many of us have a science background, but we talk in terms of moles. So subsequently, I'll explain this equation, and I would also make you understand how can this be derived. And so we'll understand the green hydrogen requirement, and then we will have the units of power required. Can please excuse me for a while? My PC battery is running low. Sorry for the disruption. So we'll after we have estimated how much green hydrogen would be required, we'll move on to estimation of the power required. So it will depend upon the efficiency of electrolyzer. So if you want to have produce 1 kg of green hydrogen, so there we know what is the efficiency of the electrolyzer. It typically varies between 50 to 60 units of power or kilowatt hours. And we would have an estimate of units of power required. And based on that, we would have, so we'll have a conversion factor from converting units of power to power capacity. So this is how we will convert we will have the electrolyzer capacity which would be required, which is quoted in terms of kilowatts or megawatts. Then moving on to the issue of renewable power availability. So as we were speaking about that, at some point of time, the electrolyzer facility would be lying idle. But if you have a higher requirement of green hydrogen or green ammonia, then you will be doing some sort of storage. So you would have to overproduce to compensate for the underproduction at a later stage. And so for that, we would have to oversize our electrolyzer, and which would end up increasing our initial capital expenditure. So this is how we'll be doing our estimation of the sizing. Bhumika, please move on to the next slide. So now how do we do the estimate of the levelized cost of green hydrogen? So again, a lot of us have a background in the power sector, so they can refer how the determination of tariff is done in power sector. Otherwise, it's a very basic way of evaluating the cost, or whatever compensation should be given, whatever fair compensation is to be given for any commodity. So what all factors we consider? Broadly, there is a fixed cost associated with any such facility, and there are variable costs which is linked to the output, right? So the fixed cost includes whatever initial investment has happened that has to be returned to the providers of capital, whether it is debt capital or whether it is capital sourced by the equity providers. And there would be bare minimum operation and maintenance expenses that would be required. Even if your facility is lying idle, some O&M expenses would be required. And there are also some periodic maintenance that has to be considered. And you will keep on paying if you have a availed loan for your facility, you would have to pay to the lenders. You cannot reduce. You cannot reduce or go away with that obligation. And also there should be some compensation for the equity providers in form of some return. So this is how the fixed cost would be is calculated in most of the scenarios. And so it is nothing new. And this is how we have done our estimation for green hydrogen as well. And in the next slide, we'll evaluate the operating cost. Bhumika, next slide, please. Yeah. So the operating or the variable cost, so it would be the cost of power consumption. So we'll consume power only when we are generating hydrogen. although there would be some bare minimum power requirement that would be there, which we can consider in the O&M expenses. And there would be some other variable costs. In our scenario, we have taken it as a percentage of power cost. So because I'm speaking, I did not got the chance of look at the questions, but there would be questions regarding it, that what is the estimate of that, but because there are not much precedents as far as such projects are concerned, so the availability of such information is also low. So we are based on the estimates provided by some experts, we'll be using using some sort of proxy for incorporating such costs. And so this is how we arrive at the variable cost, and sum total of this annual cost of annual fixed cost and variable expenses would be our annual cost of generation, and we can calculate the levelized cost. So I don't know if everybody in the audience understands what does levelized cost mean. So to be very simply, levelized cost is something which is a representative figure for a commodity cost over the years. So the cost of commodity will vary over the years, but if we have to do a comparison, so it's better to do comparison of a single figure against a single figure. So we calculate the levelized cost by discounting the future cost. Again, I'm using a very finance-heavy word, discounting. So, but I believe you'll be able to understand if you do basic Google search. So, so this is how we arrive at the levelized cost of hydrogen. So I'll demonstrate the model, and later on we'll be taking up other components of the landed cost of hydrogen. Bhumika, I'll just share my screen.
And so I'll stop sharing my screen, and then you should be able to share.
I believe the Excel model is right. So yeah, this is how I have done I have built this very basic simplified model. So I would, we have paucity of time, and even in physical sessions, we have a paucity of time, but it becomes even more difficult to demonstrate it in an online mode. But this model would be uploaded, and you are always welcome to email us your queries. We'll get back to you depending on our availability. And just to make you understand, so we start off with what is the hydrogen capacity required. Okay, maybe I'll discuss the output of the model first. So as you can see, the input power cost is the biggest component. So depending on various factors, easily around 50 to 60% cost can be attributed to the input power cost. So in a scenario when Reliance Industry is talking about reducing the cost of input power to $1 on per kg basis, so this is where they would have to work on. And how can be the input power cost be reduced? There could be some incentives by the policymakers in form of waiver of transmission charges, or they would have to reduce the input power of the source itself. So we will have to think in the terms of that, whether there is a possibility of reduction in the power in the capital expenditure that is associated with a solar panel, right? So if the world can still see more reduction in that capital expenditure, I think we'll be able to reduce the input power. And I'm just discounting other factors, right? As far as the carbon tax is concerned, or other initiatives from the policymakers are concerned, which can provide some pricing support. But on standalone basis, this cost has to be reduced by reducing the input power cost. Obviously, there is dependence upon the capital expenditure as well, but it's not a very big share, right? And even if we look at the sensitivity, so the table towards the right side of the screen. So how to read this data table is that our base case is something which is around how much cost of what would be the cost of the capital expenditure or the facility. Pardon me, it should be 1 million US dollars per megawatt. This is not INR crore. So our base case is, if you can see the green tab, it is 4.41 USD per kg, and it is against a capital expenditure of USD 1 million per megawatt basis, and the input cost of power is USD 40 megawatt hour, USD per megawatt hour of 40 units. And if we reduce this input cost of power, then, and also, the capital cost, we'll be able to achieve around 2.28 USD on per kg basis. So it's we can very well understand the sensitivities around it and the parameters which will ultimately lead to reduction of the levelized cost of green hydrogen. And so this is what I would want the participants to. This is the conclusion I would want the participants to take home. This is the most important crux of the matter. And to talk about this financial model. So as I was talking, first we would have a target of whatever is the green hydrogen production that is required. Then we will have estimate around the units of power that is required, and consequently we'll convert it in the power in the megawatt requirements that we would have. And now when we are talking about the availability of input power, so that would also impact the sizing of electrolyzer. So there would be some additional oversizing of electrolyzer, as I spoke earlier, that would be required if we want continuous supply of green hydrogen or green ammonia. So we would have to oversize the equipment. So ultimately, if there is an availability of 80%, so the electrolyzer capacity would accordingly be increased. And when you are utilizing this model, for example, if I take an extreme case of solar power, then the availability would be much lower, around 28%. And you can see that how much oversizing that would be required. So and you can see the graph that suddenly the capital expenditure is a much bigger contributor of the cost. And this is where the trade-off has to be done. The optimization of cost has to be done between the capital cost and the operating cost. So I think I have, whatever I wanted to convey from this model, I have conveyed. Although I can understand that if somebody is understanding it for the first time, it would be a bit difficult to understand. But we'll continue to have these initiatives where we'll be discussing, we'll be having such sessions for dissemination of information. Now I will move back to the slide, and I will go on to the. I believe this slides are visible to everyone.
Yeah, we can see it, Vivek.
Right.
You'll just have to do it in full screen.
Yeah. Just a moment. Bhumika, can you do this? I'm not able to.
Yeah, so you just need to so just click on the cross. Okay, you don't see it. I think just stop sharing. I'll reshare this.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
So in the meantime, I can look at some questions that are there.
Screen is there?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay.
So, as I told you that your questions over the email are also welcome. I just want to cover this other components of landed cost as well. So I'm eating out the time allotted for the question and answer session, which was the end 15 minutes. So let me just quickly cover these as well, because this is also an important cost component. Bhumika, can you move on to the next slide? Yes. So,
Just before you begin, Vivek, nevertheless, I would suggest all of you can still put in your questions in the Q&A tab, because we'll be able to generate a report of it, and then the team can get back to you as soon as possible or as per their feasibility. So instead of emailing, then we can compile it out here only.
Yeah, so we can we'll compile these questions and we can answer it over a document which will be uploaded with these presentations.
Yeah.
Nice idea, Bhumika. Thank you.
Yes.
So the chemical conversion and reconversion. So why is this an issue, or why it is to be done? As mentioned multiple times, hydrogen is highly flammable. It also has low volumetric energy density, although on per unit mass basis, it has the best calorific value, but it has low volumetric energy density. So that would mean we would require bigger containers. Bigger containers will require bigger transportation pipelines, and likewise to transport on per energy unit basis. So that's why conversion to some intermediaries or some other derivatives is to be considered. So it also depends on what is the end application of these hydrogen derivatives. If it is used ammonia as such, then obviously we have to convert. But there would be some sort of energy penalty associated with it, and which would reduce the efficiency. And also when we are transporting ammonia, so it would have much less safety issues, and it would be safe to transport over long distances, and rather for longer distances, always ammonia would be a safe and economical option. And but again, there are some chemical conversion and reconversion costs. What if the end application is again green hydrogen? So in that case, you would have to do cracking and compression, which would again involve installation of additional facility for doing this process, and also it would also entail some sort of operating expenditure. So we have sourced this power to fuel efficiency. It typically means how much usable chemical energy is in the end product in comparison whatever was the input energy that was put into it. So this is how the power to fuel efficiency is defined. And we can see the ammonia as such. So if we are talking about green hydrogen, if it is immediately used, it is the best thing to do. But the second best option is using it as in the form of ammonia. That is why the applications for marine fuel are in forms of green ammonia. Anurag was talking about how Merck is developing their shipping lines, which would be dependent upon using ammonia as a fuel. So what we see, it is the best, it's the most efficient form, right? And if somebody is interested in the scientific background, they can refer the link to this this research paper, and they'll be able to understand how is this efficiency reducing. But we can always carry home this message that conversion and reconversion will lead to additional cost, and which will end up increasing the landed cost of the product, right? And since we were talking about chemistry, I just thought I'll also put in how that 0.18 conversion factor was utilized. So it is high school chemistry. So 1 mole of nitrogen with 3 moles of hydrogen produces 2 moles of ammonia. And this is how, using the molecular weight and atomic weight, whosoever has the science background can calculate it for methanol as well. So methanol is another hydrogen derivative which can be utilized as an end application. And we'll move on to the next slide, please. So yeah, so there are some storage requirement as well. So it can be a local storage, and it can be a supply chain storage as well. As we know that there are always variations or in the supply chain. So so even the chemical conversion is form of storage. It can be viewed as some sort of storage, because if the end product is in the end form of usage is again hydrogen, and in the intermediary stage it is stored as ammonia, so it is again a sort of storage, right? So this is again sourced from a report, quite excellent report from UNECE, and this is self-explanatory. So we are talking about volume, how much volume this process can efficiently store, and there is about how much is the duration requirement. Then levelized cost of storage. So this means levelized cost of storage, and what is the benchmark and what is possible with improvement in the technology at a later stage. So this estimation has been done, and there is technology readiness level as well. Higher the technology readiness level, more closer it is towards commercial or industrial deployment. And so there are factors that has to be considered. So there would be capital expenditure associated with it. We can very well understand when we are dealing with something as inflammable as green hydrogen, then the capital expenditure would be much higher, because it would require higher strength containers, and there would be some operating expenditure. So there would be energy penalty associated with compression, liquefaction, and refrigeration, are also associated with conversion and reconversion cost. And so how to store green hydrogen, over long term, even in shorter term. So you would have to maintain high pressure and low temperature. And if we understand thermodynamics, so it would involve a lot of energy, which would be sort of, again, as we say, it would be a sort of energy penalty. And again, with chemical storage as well, as we have previously discussed, there would be cost associated with it. Please move on to the next slide. Right. And transportation and distribution. So there are various parameters that has to be considered, whether you are going to transport it over a short haul or over a long haul, and whether you are going to do it in form of pipeline, whether it is to be done from a land on land only, or we have an option of transporting over the sea. Just assume an example. For example, hydropower. There is a facility in green hydrogen, a facility of green hydrogen in Gujarat, say Gujarat, and it is backed by a hydropower plant in Bhutan. So there would be, now if that green hydrogen, sorry, wrong example. If there is a requirement in central India, say in Chhattisgarh, so whether it would be better to transport it along the peninsula from east to west coast, or it would be better to just go over the land. Now, land, a pipeline over the land would be costlier to construct, but again, it would be only if there is a cutoff distance that is there. So if we see, if we compare the cost in the first graph, So over shorter distances, it is better to transport over a pipeline. But as soon as the distances increase, it is better the dashed lines. It is better to transport um, using a ship. So similarly, there can be comparison around pipeline, whether using a pipeline or whether using a hydrogen truck. So we can very well see that using a hydrogen truck, it's always costlier to transport, even if it is a short haul distance. But many times it doesn't make sense to construct a pipeline over when we are going to distribute the green hydrogen that is produced. So I'm talking about a very futuristic scenario when it would have to be distributed to retail consumers, like we have petrol pumps or gas stations. So similarly, that sort of scenario. In that case, the way it is transported through trucks, a compressed hydrogen truck may be more economical. So there are, as has been discussed, there are various transport options, and I think I should give some 5 minutes or so for dealing with the questions of the audience. So I end up my presentation with this. Hopefully, you'll have some takeaways from this session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vivek, for such a detailed presentation and taking up the tool and explaining to our audience all the aspects of the financial aspects as well as the other cost aspects. So with this, we now come to the close of our session. And before we do that, let me invite Ms. Namrata Mukherjee, the Deputy Chief of...
Bhumika, it was scheduled at 5:10. Can we...
you can still take the questions if you want to.
Yes. I want to take. Yeah. So first of all, from Anubhav Dikshit, why electrolyzer capacity is measured in terms of power and not in terms of hydrogen, that in kg. So the efficiency is very variable. So whatever questions are, whatever quotations are given in terms of efficiency, it is not necessarily. It would depend upon the environmental conditions as well, that what actual efficiency is achieved. So it is quoted in terms of input power. So it's same way, the way we quote the capacity of a power plant in terms of megawatt and not in terms of the units that it can produce. So do we have electricity available to produce hydrogen to replace fossil fuel, from Mr. Tapas Patra? And yes, so the idea behind having green hydrogen is that we would have excess renewable capacity at some stage. So, but it cannot be utilized immediately, right? So we have a minimum peaking power requirement. Say if we have around 300 gigawatt of peaking power by 2030, and we are able to install around 500 gigawatt of renewable capacity, which is our target under the COP26. So the excess power that can be generated can be deployed in generation of hydrogen, and this is what is the basis of going towards green hydrogen. Okay, why electrolyzer? I answered. Okay, again from Mr. Anubhav Dikshit. Mr. Saddam Bala, what are the key technical considerations and challenges in integrating hydropower and hydrogen production system? Are there specific technologies or best practices? And how can this be adapted to unique characteristics of Nepal's hydropower landscape? So if you recall the availability of hydrogen power, of the hydropower, so it is not intermittent, it can be controlled, unlike solar and wind. So hydropower is very well suited for production of green hydrogen. The only thing is that in immediate future, if we have some targets for 2030, if the world has some targets of green hydrogen, so we will have to construct the backup power capacity in very quickly. Now we are left with some 7 years. So I think it would only after 2030 we'll see projects which will have high green hydrogen backed by hydropower. So Madhav Sharma, the SOEC of reversible electrolyzer fuel cell you talked about, can it be used for community mini grids for H2 being used as storage at few kilowatt levels? Yes, this very much is an application. And so this will be elaborated in the subsequent session. Generic carbon dioxide is different and it is considered emission neutral. I will not be taking up this question. I will answer this. Kindly let us know India's competitiveness in global export markets, cost of shipping ammonia, and efficiency loss in producing green hydrogen from green ammonia. I think we talked about chemical conversion and reconversion. And so which Mr. Khanna, I think we did cover this subsequently. And competitiveness. So this thesis is very much valid that South Asia has a competitiveness with respect to availability of green power. And the distance from the markets is something where we lose some of our competitive edge, in which Middle East has a better advantage because it is closer to Europe. But we can also cater to the East Asian markets. Okay, so the allocated time is over. I think we should move on to the next part of the session.
Thank you,
We'll
Vivek.
answer these questions.
Yes. That's what I was announcing. So we will have all your questions collated. So we'll try to answer them in a sequential manner through our website, and we'll upload the answers as Vivek already mentioned. So thank you for all your questions, and thank you, Vivek, for answering all the questions in detail and also for your presentation. So like I mentioned, now we move to the last part of our session today. That is the vote of thanks. And for that, I invite Ms. Namrata Mukherjee, the Deputy Chief of Party, Trade and Investments at SAREP. She has several years of experience in market organizations across policy and regulatory affairs in the power sector, commercial and market-related aspects, power generation, transmission, distribution, renewable energy, energy efficiency, and also climate change. Over to you, Namrata.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Bhumika. And this has been a real detailed and engaging discussion. I think participants are also getting, tired. So I'll keep it brief. Basically, in the run-up to the largest global engagement and negotiations on climate change, which are, kickstarting in Dubai later this week, COP28, we are very excited to kickstart our three-part masterclass on financing green hydrogen in South Asia under USAID South Asia Regional Energy Hub, which operates under USAID's South Asia Regional Energy Partnership, or the SAREP program, in collaboration with the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy Government of India. Today's masterclass by our experts did cover a few key building blocks on green hydrogen fundamentals, which we hope you found useful. And we will deep dive into a few more focused topics having an important impact on financing of green hydrogen projects in our upcoming second and third part of the masterclass, which will focus on some very important topics such as technologies, contracting issues, risk management for green hydrogen projects, best practices on standards, policies, and regulations. The second part of the master series is being held on 5th of December, and the third part of the masterclass will be held on 12th of December. And both of these will be in the same time block that was held today, which is between 2 to 5 p.m. Indian Standard Time. With this, I would now like to conclude today's session by proposing the vote of thanks, by acknowledging a few key people without whose support we wouldn't have been able to conduct the masterclass, which is a three-part series. To begin with, I would like to extend a heartfelt gratitude to Shri Dinesh Jagdaleji, Joint Secretary, Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, who, despite his busy schedule, agreed to provide his inaugural address in the form of a video to our participants. He very lucidly covered the green hydrogen context for the South Asia region, including India's policy pronouncement in the form of the National Green Hydrogen Mission. Thank you so much, sir. I would like to thank our expert speakers for the first part of the masterclass today, Mr. Anurag Nalapeneni from WRI India, who covered the session on the green hydrogen economy, and he did cover some very key aspects on the green hydrogen economy. And Mr. Vivek Salwan from SAREP, who spoke about in a very detailed fashion about the costing and economics related to green hydrogen. Thank you for your detailed thematic presentations and for answering the participants' questions on a real-time basis. I would like to express our heartfelt gratitude to colleagues from USAID India, Mr. Bhaskar Raja, Ms. Apurva Chaturvedi, and Ms. Monali Zia Hazra for their continuous guidance and support to the SAREP team while designing the contents for the masterclass. I would like to take the opportunity to thank our colleagues from the SAREP team, particularly Rakesh Goel, Sumed Agarwal, Mayank Bharadwaj, Vivek Salwan, Farah Ahmed, Bhumika Suri, Adya Gupta Mahinder, and many others who've been working behind the scenes to make this program a success. And finally, I would like to thank our participants who have joined us virtually for this 3-part masterclass, especially those who've stayed on till the end. And from different parts of the world, thank you for your time. We hope you found the first part of the masterclass useful, and we hope to see you very soon next week, that is Tuesday, 5th of December, for the second part of the masterclass. Bhumika, I will turn it back to you. If you can kindly inform the participants about the logistics and other related issues, particularly on presentations and recording of the session. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you, Namrata, and thank you for your for very sincere and gracious word of thanks. And so once again, a very heartfelt thank you to all our participants who have joined us. And I'm sure this has been a very knowledgeable experience to all of you. We have already, in a couple of days, you'll also receive a mail from us with the second and the third part of the session and the links wherein you can join if you have not already registered. So please feel free to share with your colleagues and friends and contacts, whoever wants to attend those sessions. And we'll also be having a certificate for all the participants who join us for all the 3 sessions for a comprehensive 3 days. I mean, if they join us, then we'll be able to give them award them with the certificate of participation. We will have the presentations uploaded, all 3 sessions together after the masterclass is over. So that is on the 12th December. So after that, we'll inform you via email how and where, with the exact link of the presentations and other details wherein we'll be uploading them. So those you can refer to those even after the masterclass is over. And I think with that, Namrata has also mentioned that we have the next session on December 5th. So that will be on evolving technologies for green hydrogen, contracting issues in green hydrogen economy. So please do not miss that as well. And please do join us. It is at the same time, 2 p.m. India time. And I think we did witness a lot of excitement, a lot of participants. It went beyond 250, I think, at one time. So expressing all our gratitude to all those who have made it till now. Please do, I've also shared the social media links in the chat box in case you do not have those. So please follow us on the social media channels of SAREP as well as SARE so that you can be updated with all our upcoming events and join in wherever you can. Any questions, you will also receive a mail, so you can reply back to that email or the email wherein you have received the link. So that is sare@sarepsouthAsia.org. In case you have any questions for the upcoming sessions, you can please write us back there. And hoping to see you all for the next sessions. I hope it was an enjoyable learning experience. Thank you again for your time. Thank you. Namaskar.